The ground was still loose when he knelt. Daniel pressed his palm flat against the cold soil as if he could steady it, as if it might shift if he didn't. The headstone was too clean. Her name looked wrong, carved in stone. Claire Bennett. Beloved mother. Beloved wife. He almost laughed at that. Wind moved through the cemetery in thin, restless threads. He hadn't cried at the service. Not once. He stood straight while people touched his arm and said things he barely heard. But here, alone, something inside him kept reaching for her. Not the memory, not the past. Her. He felt it before he thought it. A mistake. A fracture in the story. The earth under his hand was damp. And for a second, just a second, he wasn't sure she was beneath it. Daniel went back to the grave the next morning. He told himself it was normal, that people did that. They visited. They sat. They talked to stone because there was nothing else left, but he didn't bring flowers. He brought nothing. He drove there in silence with both hands tight on the wheel, jaw clenched so hard his teeth hurt. The cemetery gates were open. Same as always. Same wide path cutting through the rows of headstones like a quiet road through a place that didn't belong to anyone living. The sky was gray, not stormy, just heavy, the kind of gray that made everything look flattened, like the world had lost depth. He parked in the same spot, walked the same way, and when he reached her headstone, he stopped a few feet away instead of going close. Claire Bennett. It still looked wrong. The letters were too sharp, too recent, the stone itself too bright compared to the others, like it hadn't had time to absorb sadness yet. He stared at it for a long time. His eyes moved over every line. Her name. The dates. The short sentence her sister had insisted on adding beneath it. Gone too soon. He exhaled slowly through his nose. He didn't kneel this time. He stayed standing, shoulders squared, like he was at some kind of inspection. He didn't know what he expected to feel. But there was something in his chest that didn't match grief anymore. It was a kind of irritation. A pressure. Like a splinter he couldn't find. He stepped closer and crouched, not touching the soil this time, just looking. The dirt was still dark from yesterday's rain. A few small footprints had hardened into the surface. Not his. He leaned in. They were small. Narrow. The tread shallow. A woman's shoe, maybe. He froze there, one knee near the ground, eyes fixed on those marks as if staring long enough would make them explain themselves. It didn't make sense. The funeral was 3 days ago. After that, the cemetery should have been empty except for strangers, people visiting their own dead. No one had any reason to come here. He sat back on his heel and looked around. The cemetery was quiet. No movement, no voices, only the sound of wind sliding through the trees. Daniel's throat tightened. He didn't know if he was angry or scared. It felt like both, but not cleanly separated. He stood and walked back to the car without looking at the headstone again. The drive home was longer than it should have been. Every red light felt like a personal insult. His fingers kept tapping the steering wheel in an uneven rhythm, like his body was trying to get rid of energy it didn't know how to hold. When he got to the house, he didn't go inside right away. He sat in the driveway. The house looked the same as it had before she died. Same porch light. Same front steps. Same white trim she'd repainted herself 2 summers ago because she said the old paint made the place look tired. Now it looked tired anyway. Daniel finally opened the car door and stepped out. The cold hit his face. He walked up to the front door and stopped. He didn't want to go in. Inside meant silence. Inside meant her coffee mug still in the cabinet, her jacket still hanging in the hall closet because he couldn't bring himself to move it. Inside meant his daughter. Emma, 8 years old and already too quiet. He turned the key and pushed the door open. The smell inside was faint but familiar. Laundry detergent. Old wood. A trace of the lavender candle Claire used to light when she was stressed. He shut the door gently behind him. Emma was sitting on the living room floor, knees tucked under her, coloring in a book. The TV was on but muted. A cartoon flickered without sound. She didn't look up right away. Daniel stood there watching her for a moment. The top of her head, the way her hair fell in loose waves, she had Claire's hair. Claire's hands, too. Long fingers, small nails. Daniel felt something tighten in his throat again. Emma finally glanced up. Her eyes landed on him and stayed there. "Did you go again?" she asked. Her voice was flat. Not accusing, just tired. Daniel nodded once. "Yeah." Emma went back to her coloring. "Why?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out at first. "Because I don't believe it. Because something feels wrong. Because I can't breathe unless I see the stone again." He swallowed. "I just wanted to." Emma didn't respond. She shaded in a flower slowly, carefully, as if staying inside the lines was the only thing she could control. Daniel walked into the kitchen. The clock above the stove ticked too loudly. He poured himself a glass of water and drank it standing up. It tasted like metal. He set the glass down harder than he meant to. The sound echoed. Emma didn't react. Daniel leaned both hands on the counter and stared at the sink. Claire had died in a car accident. That's what they told him. A collision on a rural road outside the city. Her car found off the shoulder, wrapped around a tree. Fire damage. Impact trauma. No survivors. No open casket. No final look. They said the body was too damaged. He remembered standing in the funeral home, staring at the closed lid like it was mocking him. Her sister, Mariah, had held his arm and whispered, "Don't do this to yourself," when he asked again if he could see her. Like it was some kind of selfish request, Daniel's hands curled into fists on the countertop. He could still hear the police officer's voice when they knocked on his door that night. Calm, practiced. Too calm, like he'd said the same words 1,000 times. "I'm sorry to inform you." Daniel closed his eyes. He forced himself to inhale. Then exhale. He turned his head slightly and looked toward the hallway where Claire's purse still hung on its hook. He hadn't touched it. It stayed there like a ghost that refused to leave. He stared at it for a long time. Then he walked over and took it down. The strap was worn where it had rubbed against her shoulder. The leather smelled faintly like her perfume, something clean and soft that used to cling to her sweaters. He held it in both hands like it might break. Emma appeared at the edge of the kitchen watching him. She didn't step closer. "You're not supposed to touch her stuff," she said. Daniel looked at her. He didn't answer right away. "I know," he said finally. Emma's face didn't change, but her eyes did something small, like they were trying to hold something back. Daniel felt a sting behind his own eyes and looked away quickly. "I just need to check something," he said. Emma didn't argue. She turned and went back to the living room. Daniel set the purse on the kitchen table and unzipped it slowly. The sound of the zipper felt loud. Inside were the usual things: lip balm, a pack of gum, her wallet, a folded receipt. Keys weren't there. Those had been returned separately by the police in a plastic evidence bag. He reached for the wallet. It was the same brown one she'd had for years, the edges soft from use. He opened it. Her driver's license was still there. Her photo stared back at him, smiling slightly, like she'd been amused at the whole concept of identification photos. Daniel's thumb hovered over her face. He flipped through the cards. Grocery store membership, insurance, a library card, a picture of Emma folded behind the clear plastic. Then he found something he hadn't noticed before, a small white card tucked behind the insurance. Not a credit card, not a business card. It was thicker, plain, no logo. He slid it out. A hospital card. Not a bill, not an appointment reminder. It had a name printed in black text, Dr. H. Larkin, and beneath it, Neurology Department. A phone number. Daniel stared at it. Claire had never mentioned a neurologist. He sat down slowly, like his knees had stopped working properly. The chair scraped faintly against the floor. His heart was beating faster than it should have been. He tried to think. Maybe it was old. Maybe she'd gone once for migraines. Maybe it was nothing. But the card looked new. The edges were sharp, not worn, not bent, like it had been put in there recently. He held it between his fingers and stared until the letters blurred. The first thought that came wasn't logical. It wasn't even a full sentence. It was just a feeling. She was hiding something. He swallowed hard. Then he forced himself to open the purse wider and search the side pockets. His hands moved quickly now, not careful, not respectful. He found a small notebook. Claire's handwriting covered the first page. Tight, neat lines. Daniel flipped through it. Most of it was grocery lists. Notes about Emma's school schedule. A reminder to call the plumber. The kind of normal things that made his stomach twist because they proved she'd been alive, planning ahead, right up until she wasn't. Then, about halfway through, he saw a page that wasn't a list. It was a name, John Keller, and beneath it a phone number. Daniel stared at it. His mouth went dry. He knew that name. John Keller had been Claire's co-worker, a man from her office who'd come to the funeral. He'd stood in the back, hands clasped, eyes red. Daniel remembered the way he'd avoided looking at Daniel directly. Like he was ashamed. Daniel had assumed it was grief. Now he wasn't sure. Daniel flipped the page. Another name. S. Reeves, another number. And next to it, in Claire's handwriting, don't trust. Daniel felt his skin prickle. The kitchen felt colder than it had a minute ago. He looked toward the living room again. Emma was still coloring, head down, unaware. Daniel lowered the notebook to the table. His fingers trembled slightly. He didn't want this. He didn't want questions. Questions meant there might be answers. And answers meant Claire hadn't just died. Answers meant something else had happened. Something she hadn't told him. He pressed the heel of his hand against his forehead. For a long moment, he just sat there, breathing slowly, trying to keep himself from doing something reckless. But his mind kept returning to those footprints at the grave. Small, fresh, not his, not the groundskeeper's heavy boots, a woman's. He picked up his phone. His thumb hovered over the screen. Then he typed in the name. John Keller. He still had the company directory saved from when Claire worked there. He didn't know why he'd never deleted it. Maybe because deleting it felt like agreeing she was gone. The number appeared. Daniel stared at it. He waited, listening to the faint sound of Emma's crayon scratching paper. Then he pressed call. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then someone answered. Hello? John's voice was cautious. Tired. Daniel didn't speak immediately. His throat felt tight. John spoke again. Hello? Daniel finally said. It's Daniel. Silence. Not long, but long enough. Then John exhaled sharply, like he'd been holding his breath. Daniel, John said quietly. Hey. Daniel gripped the phone harder. I found your number in Claire's notebook, Daniel said. Another pause. John's voice dropped. You shouldn't have that. Daniel stared at the kitchen wall. His eyes landed on a small dent near the light switch. Claire had made it years ago when she'd swung a grocery bag too hard, laughing, saying she was going to break the whole house. Daniel's voice came out low. Why was your number there? John didn't answer right away. Daniel waited. His stomach felt hollow. Finally, John said, I don't know what you're looking for. Daniel's lips parted slightly. His breath fogged the phone screen. I'm looking for the truth, he said. John's voice tightened. Daniel, don't do this. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? John swallowed audibly. Daniel could hear it through the line. Then John said, almost in a whisper, just let it go. Daniel felt his heartbeat spike. He sat up straighter. Let it go, he repeated. My wife is dead. John's breathing sounded uneven. Daniel waited for him to say something that made sense. Instead, John said, I'm sorry. I really am. But if you start digging... Digging into what? Daniel snapped, his voice sharper than he meant. Emma's head lifted in the living room. She looked toward the kitchen. Daniel lowered his voice immediately, but the anger didn't leave. It just sank deeper. John went quiet. Daniel could hear faint background noise on John's end. Maybe traffic. Maybe a television. Life continuing. Daniel's voice came out strained. Why are you scared right now? John didn't answer. Daniel squeezed his eyes shut. Then he said, did she know she was going to die? That question landed differently. Even Daniel felt it. The moment it left his mouth, his stomach twisted. It sounded insane. It sounded like conspiracy. But John's silence wasn't the silence of confusion. It was the silence of someone trying not to confirm something. John finally spoke. His voice was barely steady. Daniel, he said, stop calling me, please. Then the line went dead. Daniel stared at the phone. For a moment, he didn't move at all. He just sat there, phone still pressed to his ear, like his body hadn't caught up with what had happened. Then he lowered it slowly. His hand was shaking now, openly. He looked at the notebook again, at the words Claire had written. Don't trust. The air in the kitchen felt thick, like it was full of something invisible. Daniel heard Emma's footsteps behind him. Small. Careful. She stopped at the edge of the kitchen. Daddy? She said. Daniel turned his head. Emma's eyes were wide, not scared, just watching him, but she could feel something shifting, even if she didn't understand what it was. Daniel swallowed. He forced his face into something calmer. What is it, Em? Emma hesitated. Then she said softly, are you mad at Mom? The question hit him harder than anything John Keller had said. Daniel's chest tightened so suddenly he had to look down. His hands rested on the table. One of them still held the hospital card. He stared at it. Then he looked back at Emma. He tried to answer. He couldn't. Because the truth was, he didn't know what he felt. Not yet. He only knew something had started, something he couldn't stop. And Claire, wherever she was, dead or not, had left the first thread behind for him to pull. Daniel's voice came out rough. No, he said, I'm not mad at her. Emma stared at him. Then she nodded once, slowly, as if she was accepting an answer that didn't fully satisfy her. She turned and walked back to the living room. Daniel watched her go. And when she was gone, he leaned forward and pressed his hands against his face, trying to steady his breathing. The notebook was still open, the names still there, and in the silence of the house, Daniel realized something he hadn't admitted even to himself. He wasn't grieving anymore. Not fully. Because grief required certainty. And certainty was gone. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He tried. He went through the motions like a person who still believed routines mattered. He put Emma to bed, read her a short book she barely listened to, kissed her forehead, turned off the light. He stood in the doorway longer than he should have. Emma lay on her side facing the wall. Daddy, she said, her voice muffled into the pillow. Yeah? Did you call someone? Daniel hesitated. He didn't like lying to her. Not even small lies. Claire used to be better at softening things, shaping the truth into something a child could hold without cutting themselves. Daniel had never been good at that. Yes, he said. Emma didn't turn around. Who? A man from Mom's work. Silence. Then, quietly, Emma asked, why? Daniel swallowed. His throat felt dry like it had been scraped. I just needed to ask something. Emma's voice was almost too small to hear. About the crash? Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. He stared at the outline of her small shoulders under the blanket. Who told you it was a crash? He asked. Emma didn't answer immediately. Then she said, Aunt Mariah. Of course. Mariah had been the one managing everything. Funeral arrangements, phone calls, insurance paperwork. The kind of work Daniel couldn't do because every time he tried, he felt like he was stepping into a room where Claire's voice should be and wasn't. Mariah had filled the silence. Mariah had spoken for Claire. Daniel forced his voice to stay even. Okay. Emma turned her head slightly, just enough that Daniel could see one eye. It was open. Mom didn't like Aunt Mariah, Emma said. Daniel's stomach tightened. That's not true, he said automatically. But the words felt wrong even as he said them. Claire and Mariah had always been strained, not openly hostile, not screaming or dramatic, just small, constant friction. Claire would stiffen when Mariah called. Her voice would turn polite in a way that wasn't her. Daniel had always tried not to get involved. It was family. It wasn't his place. That was what he told himself. Emma blinked slowly. She didn't. Daniel's hand tightened around the doorknob. He should have left then. Let Emma sleep. Let the house settle. But something in him needed to hear her say it again. Needed confirmation from the one person who had lived inside that house besides him. "Why do you think that?" he asked. Emma shrugged under the blanket. Mom got quiet when she came over. Daniel felt a dull pressure behind his eyes. He nodded once, even though Emma couldn't see it. "Go to sleep," he said softly. Emma's eyelids fluttered. "Okay." Daniel watched until her breathing slowed, until her face softened. Then he closed the door. The hallway was dark. He stood there, motionless, listening to the house. The fridge hummed faintly. Pipes clicked. The wind pushed gently against the windows like fingers testing the glass. Daniel walked to the kitchen and sat at the table again. The notebook was still there. The hospital card. The names. The numbers. He stared at them like they were a language he didn't know, but somehow felt responsible for understanding. At around 2 in the morning, he called the number on the neurologist's card. He expected an automated message. Instead, a woman answered on the second ring. Her voice was professional, slightly irritated, like she'd been dragged out of sleep, but had trained herself to sound composed. "Neurology department. This is Sandra." Daniel's mouth went dry. He hadn't thought past the act of calling. He hadn't imagined someone picking up. He cleared his throat. "Hi, I'm calling about a patient. Claire Bennett." There was a pause, a shift in the air, even through the phone. "I'm sorry," Sandra said, slower now. "Who is this?" "My name is Daniel Bennett. I'm her husband." Silence again. Longer. Then Sandra's voice came back, quieter, guarded. "Mr. Bennett, it's very late." "I know," Daniel said. "I'm sorry. I just—" He stopped. His heart was pounding. He didn't want to say the words out loud. He didn't want to make it real. But he had to. "My wife is dead," he said. The line went so still. Daniel thought it had disconnected. Then Sandra inhaled, a sharp, involuntary sound. "Oh," she said. Daniel gripped the phone. She had this card in her wallet. "Dr. Larkin. I didn't know she was seeing anyone. I just want to understand why." Sandra didn't respond immediately. Daniel could hear the faint sound of a keyboard, or maybe paper being moved. Then she said carefully, "I can't give out patient information." "I'm not asking for details," Daniel said quickly. His voice cracked slightly and he hated that it did. "I'm just asking if she was sick, if she knew something, if she was hiding something from me." Sandra's breathing was uneven, like she was thinking too hard, like she was trying to decide what rules mattered right now. Daniel waited. He didn't blink. He stared at the dark kitchen window. His reflection stared back, eyes hollow, face drawn like someone older wearing his skin. Finally, Sandra said, "Mr. Bennett, can you tell me when she died?" Daniel swallowed. 3 days ago." Another pause. Then Sandra said, "That's not possible." Daniel didn't speak. His hand tightened so hard around the phone, his knuckles ached. Sandra's voice came out clipped now, as if she regretted the sentence the moment it left her mouth. "She was here last week." Daniel felt his chest seize. He leaned forward over the table. "What?" he said. "She was here," Sandra repeated, slower, like she was trying to be precise. "Claire Bennett. She checked in. She met with Dr. Larkin. She signed paperwork. I remember because she was nervous." Daniel's mouth opened, closed again. He couldn't find words. His brain kept stalling like it couldn't process what it was being fed. Last week, that meant she'd been alive. Alive and walking into a hospital. Alive and holding a pen. Alive and not telling him. Daniel forced himself to speak. Are you sure? Yes, Sandra said. Daniel's voice came out low. Why was she there? Sandra hesitated. Then she said, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. I really shouldn't. Daniel pressed his forehead against his free hand. His skin felt cold. Please, he said. He didn't recognize his own voice. It sounded stripped down. Just tell me if she was dying. Sandra didn't answer right away. Then she said, no. Daniel's eyes squeezed shut. The word didn't bring relief. It brought something worse. Because if she wasn't dying, then why? Sandra continued, her voice tense. It wasn't terminal. That's all I can say. I'm sorry. Daniel's throat tightened. Sandra, why would she be in neurology if she wasn't sick? Silence. Then Sandra said quietly, some people come in because they're scared, not because they're sick. Daniel lifted his head. He stared at the notebook again. The name S. Reeves. The words, don't trust. His heart hammered. Sandra, he said, is your last name Reeves? There was a sharp pause, then, how did you? Daniel's stomach dropped. The room felt like it tilted. He sat back slowly, chair creaking under him. I found your name, he said, in her notebook. Sandra didn't speak for a long moment. When she finally did, her voice sounded different. Strained, smaller. You need to stop, she said. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Stop what? Stop calling people, she whispered. Stop looking, please. Daniel felt heat rise in his chest, slow and dangerous. Why? He said. Sandra's breath trembled. Because you don't understand what you're touching. Daniel's voice hardened. My wife is dead. Sandra made a quiet sound. Not a sob. Not a laugh. Something in between. Like pain swallowed quickly. Then she said, I know what they told you. Daniel froze. His skin went cold. What does that mean? He said. Sandra didn't answer immediately. Daniel could hear her breathing, the faint background noise of a building at night, a distant intercom, a door closing. Then she said, I can't talk about this on the phone. Daniel leaned forward again. His hand shook. You know something, he said. Sandra's voice dropped. Mr. Bennett, I don't know you. I don't owe you anything. But I'm telling you right now, if you keep digging, you could get your daughter hurt. The words hit him like a slap. Daniel's lungs tightened. He couldn't inhale properly for a second. He stood up so suddenly the chair scraped loudly across the floor. What did you just say? He whispered. Sandra's voice trembled. Just leave it alone. Daniel gripped the edge of the table. He looked toward the hallway instinctively, toward Emma's bedroom door. His mind flashed with images he didn't want. Emma walking home from school. Emma alone in the yard. Emma answering the door. Daniel's voice came out sharp. Is she alive? Silence. Daniel waited, barely breathing. Sandra, he said again. Quieter now, like his voice might break if he pushed it. Is Claire alive? The line stayed silent. Not disconnected. Not dead air. Just a person on the other end who wasn't answering. Daniel's stomach turned. That silence wasn't confusion. It wasn't denial. It was fear. Sandra finally spoke. I'm sorry, she whispered, and then she hung up. Daniel stood there holding the phone to his ear long after the call ended. The screen went dark. The kitchen felt too still. He slowly lowered the phone and stared at it as if it might light up again and undo what he'd just heard. He wasn't shaking anymore. He was numb. He looked at Claire's notebook again, at the names, at the warning. Don't trust. His eyes drifted to the purse, then to the hook on the wall where it had hung untouched for days. He felt something shift inside him, something that had been grief turning into something harder, something more focused. Not rage, not hope, a kind of cold clarity. He picked up the notebook and carried it to the living room. The couch still smelled faintly like Claire's shampoo, even though he hadn't seen her in weeks. He sat down and opened his laptop. He didn't know what he was looking for yet, but he knew he couldn't sit in that house and pretend anymore. He typed Claire's name into the search bar. Then he typed the word accident. Articles came up. Local news. A short report about a fatal crash on County Road 16, a burned vehicle. A woman identified as Claire Bennett. Daniel clicked it. The photo showed the road. Police tape. A blurred tree line. He stared at it. Then he read the article slowly. Once. Twice. 3 times. The report was vague. It mentioned speed. It mentioned weather conditions. But one line caught him. Authorities have not released further details pending investigation. Pending investigation. 3 days after her funeral. That wasn't normal. Daniel opened another tab and searched for the case number. It was listed in the report. The police department website had a public log. He found the entry, the date, the time. Then he saw something that made his skin prickle. The incident wasn't listed as fatal accident. It was listed as vehicle fire, saxate, foul play. Daniel stared at the screen. His eyes didn't move. His heartbeat slow now. Heavy. Measured. Foul play. He leaned back on the couch and let his head rest against the cushion. The house was dark except for the laptop glow. Outside, the street light cast pale lines across the floor through the blinds. Daniel listened to the quiet. Emma was asleep down the hall. Everything looked the same, but the world wasn't the same anymore. Because someone had lied. And not a small lie. A structured lie. A lie that had required paperwork, silence, coordination. He thought about Mariah, about her calm voice at the funeral. The way she'd stood like she belonged there more than Daniel did. The way she'd guided every conversation away from questions. He remembered the closed casket. He remembered being told the body was too damaged. He remembered never seeing her. His throat tightened again, but this time it wasn't grief. It was something like betrayal. Daniel closed the laptop slowly. The click of it shutting sounded final. He sat there for a long time, hands resting on his knees, staring into the dim room. Then he stood and walked quietly down the hallway. He stopped outside Emma's bedroom door. He didn't go in. He just stood there, listening to her breathing. Then he whispered, barely moving his lips, "I'm going to find her." The words didn't feel like a promise. They felt like an obligation, a debt. Daniel turned and went back to the living room. He pulled his phone out again. This time he didn't hesitate. He searched for John Keller's address. It took only a few minutes. Social media, public records, an old company newsletter that listed employee contact details. John lived 20 minutes away. Daniel stared at the address on the screen. He didn't feel tired. He didn't feel afraid. He felt empty in a way that made decisions easy. He grabbed his coat, his keys, and left the house. The door shut quietly behind him. Outside, the cold air hit his face and woke something sharper in him. The street was silent. No cars. No people. Daniel got into the car and started the engine. The headlights washed the driveway in pale light. He backed out slowly. As he turned onto the road, he glanced once at the house in the rearview mirror. Emma's window was dark. The house looked peaceful, and Daniel hated that, because peace felt like a lie now, too. He drove toward John Keller's apartment with both hands steady on the wheel, eyes fixed ahead. The city lights grew closer. His mind replayed Sandra's warning. "You could get your daughter hurt." He felt his stomach twist again, but he didn't slow down, because somewhere beneath the fear, beneath the grief, beneath the confusion, there was one thought he couldn't escape. Claire had been alive last week, which meant she might still be alive now. And if she was alive, then she had left Emma. She had left him. And Daniel didn't know which possibility hurt worse. He pulled into the apartment complex parking lot and shut off the engine. For a moment, he just sat there, staring at the building. A few windows glowed softly. Someone's television flickered behind curtains. A dog barked in the distance. Normal life. Daniel got out of the car. His shoes scraped against gravel. He walked toward the entrance. Each step felt heavy, not from exhaustion, but from what he knew was coming. He reached the door, pressed the buzzer, waited. A long pause. Then the intercom crackled. John's voice came through, tight and strained. "Who is it?" Daniel leaned close to the speaker. "It's me," he said. Silence. Then, faintly, a sound like John inhaling sharply. The door clicked, unlocked. Daniel pushed it open and stepped inside. The hallway smelled like old carpet and cheap air freshener. He climbed the stairs slowly, one hand on the railing. When he reached John's door, he didn't knock. He just stood there for a second, staring at the peeling paint. Then he knocked once. Hard. The door opened almost immediately. John Keller stood there barefoot, wearing sweatpants and a wrinkled shirt. His hair was messy. His face looked pale, drawn tight around the eyes. He stared at Daniel like he'd been expecting this and praying it wouldn't happen. Daniel didn't speak right away. He just looked at John. Then he said, very quietly, "You knew." John's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked down the hallway, checking if anyone was watching. He stepped back. "Come in," he said. Daniel entered. The apartment was small, cluttered. A half-eaten sandwich sat on a plate on the coffee table. Papers were spread across the couch like someone had been sorting through them. John shut the door behind Daniel and locked it. The click of the lock sounded too loud. Daniel turned slowly. His voice was low, controlled, but it didn't sound like him anymore. "You knew she wasn't dead," Daniel said. John's face twitched. He didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it either. He just looked at Daniel with a kind of exhausted fear. And that was enough. Daniel felt his stomach drop again, deeper this time, like something inside him had finally given way. John swallowed. "Daniel," he started. Daniel cut him off. "Where is she?" John stared at him. His lips parted. Then he shut them again. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, like he was trying to hold himself together. Daniel stepped closer. His voice dropped even further. "Where is my wife?" John's eyes flicked away, and Daniel knew before John said anything. He knew this wasn't going to be simple, because John looked like a man who had been living with something he couldn't carry, and Daniel had just walked into the middle of it. John finally whispered, "She's not supposed to be found." Daniel stood still. His breathing slowed. His body felt cold. He stared at John, and when he spoke again, his voice sounded almost flat. "Then someone better explain why she has a grave." And John's face broke in a way Daniel had never seen before. Not tears, just something collapsing. Something like guilt finally losing its grip. John looked at Daniel and said, barely audible, "She didn't have a choice." Daniel didn't move, but his hands curled slowly at his sides, because he knew then whatever had happened to Claire, it hadn't ended in that car. It had started there, and he had been standing at the wrong ending the entire time. John didn't sit down. He stayed standing near the door like he might need to run. Daniel noticed at first the way John's back kept brushing the wall, like he needed something solid behind him. "She didn't have a choice," Daniel repeated. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. John rubbed a hand over his face. He looked older than Daniel remembered. The skin under his eyes had darkened. His mouth had lost its shape, like he hadn't smiled in days. "You shouldn't be here," John said quietly. Daniel didn't respond to that. He walked further into the apartment instead, slow steps, taking in the room. Papers on the couch, a laptop open but asleep, a jacket thrown over a chair. "Start talking," Daniel said. John exhaled through his nose. It wasn't anger. It was something closer to resignation. "I can't tell you everything," he said. Daniel looked at him. "That's not your decision." John's jaw tightened. "It's not mine. That's the problem." Daniel felt a flicker of something sharp in his chest. "Who's it?" John hesitated. His eyes moved toward the window, then back to Daniel. "You ever notice how some things just disappear?" John said. Daniel's patience thinned. "I'm not here for riddles. I'm not giving you riddles." John's voice rose slightly, then dropped again when he caught himself. I'm trying to say this without making it worse. Daniel stepped closer. You already made it worse. John swallowed. The apartment felt too small. The air stale. She found something, John said finally. Daniel didn't blink. What? John shook his head. I don't know everything. She didn't tell me everything. But she came to me about a month ago. Said something at work didn't add up. Daniel stared at him. What doesn't add up? John's eyes flicked away again. Daniel waited. John's voice came out low. Financial reports, grants, numbers that didn't match what was being filed. Claire worked in administrative compliance for a medical research foundation. Daniel knew the title, but not the details. He'd never asked much about her job. She'd come home tired sometimes, quiet, but she always said it was just paperwork. She thought someone was moving money, John continued. Large amounts. They're different departments, so it wouldn't look obvious. Daniel felt his pulse in his neck. Who? John hesitated too long. Who? Daniel repeated. John shook his head slowly. If I say his name, you'll go straight to him. Probably. And that will get you killed. The words landed without drama. No raised voice, no theatrics, just flat. Daniel held John's gaze. I've already buried my wife, he said. You think I care about that? John flinched. Daniel saw it. You didn't bury her, John said quietly. That sentence hit differently. Daniel's throat tightened. He felt it, but didn't show it. Where is she? He said again. John looked exhausted now. She panicked, he said. When she realized how deep it went, she brought copies of files to someone outside the foundation. Daniel's stomach turned. Police? John gave a small, humorless shake of his head. Not exactly. Then who? John hesitated again. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. John. John's eyes finally settled on Daniel's face. There was something like regret in them. She went to the state prosecutor's office, he said. Daniel blinked. That's police. No. It's higher. And more political. Daniel absorbed that. And? John inhaled slowly. 2 days later, her car went off the road. Daniel's jaw tightened. That's what they told you, John corrected himself. Silence. Daniel felt something heavy settle inside him. Not shock. That had already passed. This was something colder. You're saying the crash wasn't an accident. John didn't answer directly, but he didn't need to. Daniel's mind replayed the police log, suspected foul play. He felt anger rise, not loud, not explosive, just steady heat. Why fake her death? Daniel asked. John's face changed at that, tightened. They didn't plan to. Daniel frowned slightly. What does that mean? John rubbed his hands together like he was cold. The car burned. It was supposed to. It was meant to send a message. Daniel felt a hollow space open in his chest. A message to who? John met his eyes. To her. The room went quiet. Daniel's brain stalled again, trying to keep pace with what he was hearing. They ran her off the road, John said. They expected her to die. Daniel felt a pulse of nausea. But she didn't, John continued. She got out. Daniel's fingers twitched. How do you know? John's voice dropped. Because she called me. Daniel's breath caught. When? The night it happened. Daniel's mind flashed back to that night. The knock at the door. The police officer's voice. The timeline. She called you, Daniel repeated. She was shaking, John said. Could barely talk. Said the car had caught fire. Said she'd gotten out before it spread. She thought someone was watching. Daniel's chest tightened painfully. Why didn't she call me? John didn't answer immediately. Daniel felt his throat burn. Why didn't she call her husband? He said, his voice lower now. John looked down at his hands. She said if she called you, they'd trace it, he said. She didn't know who was involved. She didn't know who was listening. She thought you'd be safer if you believed she was dead. Daniel's ears rang. Safer. He stood there, trying to process that. She let me bury her, Daniel said. John winced slightly. It moved fast, he said. Once the car was found burned and there was no body. Daniel's head snapped up. No body! John swallowed. There wasn't enough left to identify. Daniel felt the floor shift under him. What are you saying? John's voice dropped to almost nothing. There was never confirmation it was her. Daniel's breath left him in a slow, stunned exhale. The closed casket. The refusal to let him see her. Mariah insisting it would only make things worse. Daniel's stomach turned. Mariah, he said. John looked up sharply. What about her? Daniel's mind raced. She handled everything, he said. The funeral, the paperwork, the statements. John's expression shifted. You think she knew? Daniel didn't answer, but the idea had already rooted itself. John ran a hand through his hair. She went into hiding, he said, that night. She didn't even go home. She met someone. Who? John hesitated. Daniel stepped forward again. John. John closed his eyes briefly, like he was bracing for impact. An investigator, he said. Private. Not law enforcement. Someone who works outside the system. Daniel felt his heart pound again. Name. John shook his head. I don't have it. Then how do you know? Because she told me. She said if anything happened to her, I should wait. Wait for contact. Daniel stared at him. Contact from who? John's voice thinned. From her. Silence settled between them. Daniel felt the weight of that word. Her. Alive. Somewhere. Has she contacted you? Daniel asked. John hesitated. That was answer enough. Daniel stepped closer, his voice dropping dangerously low. When? John's throat worked. 2 days ago. Daniel's breath stopped. 2 days ago, he repeated. John nodded faintly. She said you'd start asking questions. Daniel felt his chest tighten painfully. She knew I would. John's eyes softened slightly. She knows you. Daniel looked away for a second. His jaw flexed. What did she say? He asked. John's hands trembled now. He clasped them together to hide it. She said if you started digging, it meant you didn't believe it. Daniel's stomach twisted. And? She said that meant she miscalculated. Daniel didn't move. John swallowed. She said you weren't supposed to feel something was wrong. Daniel let out a breath through his nose. She's never been good at lying, he said quietly. John gave a weak nod. She didn't want to involve you, he said. She said if you knew, you'd go after them. Daniel's eyes sharpened. And she was right. John stared at him. That's exactly what she was afraid of. Daniel felt something inside him settle into place. A line drawn. Where is she? He said again. John's mouth opened. Closed. Then he said, I don't know exactly. Daniel's expression hardened. Not exactly? John lifted his hand slightly. She moves. She doesn't stay anywhere long. She uses different phones, different names. Daniel felt anger stir again, but this time it was laced with something else. Relief. She was careful. Alive and careful. She told me not to tell you anything, John said quietly. Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line. And yet. John looked at him with something close to desperation. She said if you figured it out on your own, I should deny everything. Daniel almost laughed, but no sound came out. You're bad at that, he said. John's mouth twitched, but it wasn't humor. I didn't think you'd come here tonight. Daniel looked toward the door briefly. I didn't either. The room went quiet again. Daniel felt the magnitude of it pressing down on him now. She had chosen silence. She had chosen distance. She had let him believe she was dead. He didn't know whether to be grateful or furious. Maybe both. John's voice softened slightly. She was scared, Daniel. Daniel's jaw tightened. So was I. John didn't argue with that. They stood there for a moment in the small apartment. Two men caught in something neither of them had built, but both were inside now. Who was she afraid of? Daniel asked finally. John hesitated longer this time. Then he said a name. Daniel recognized it instantly. Richard Hale, director of the foundation. A man who'd shaken Daniel's hand at company events. Smiled, asked about Emma. Daniel felt something inside him go very still. Hale. That explained the weight of it. The political caution. The hesitation. Hale had connections. Influence. You have proof, Daniel said. It wasn't a question. John nodded faintly. Some. Where? John glanced at the scattered papers on the couch. Daniel followed his gaze. Copies, John said. Encrypted files. Transaction logs. Daniel walked toward the couch slowly. He picked up one of the papers. Numbers. Account transfers. Grant. Allocations. It meant nothing to him at first glance, but he saw Hale's signature at the bottom of one document. Clear. Clean. Daniel felt a low hum build inside his chest. Why haven't you gone to the police? He asked. John let out a hollow laugh. Because the police attend his charity events. Daniel's stomach dropped. The room felt smaller again. She thinks if she stays gone long enough, it'll die down, John said. The investigation, the attention. Daniel shook his head slowly. No. John frowned slightly. She thinks that, he said. Daniel's voice was quiet now. She doesn't know me very well. John's expression shifted. Daniel placed the paper back on the couch. She thought I'd accept it, Daniel said. The grave. The silence. John didn't respond. Daniel looked at him steadily. She underestimated what it feels like to bury someone you're still married to. John swallowed. Daniel turned toward the door. Where are you going? John asked. Daniel paused, hand on the doorknob. He didn't look back. To fix the part she couldn't, he said, and for the first time since this started, his voice didn't shake. Daniel drove home slower than he'd driven there, not because he was calmer, because he was thinking too much. The streets were mostly empty. A few cars passed now and then, headlights sweeping across wet pavement. The city looked the same as it always had, but it felt staged now. Like everything normal was just a layer over something else. His hand stayed steady on the wheel. His mind didn't. Claire was alive. Those words kept repeating in him like a pulse. He didn't feel joy. He didn't feel relief. Not cleanly. He felt something like vertigo. As if the last week of his life had been a room he'd been locked inside, and now someone had opened the door and shown him the wall was fake. He pulled into his driveway just after 3. The house was dark, still, quiet. He sat in the car for a moment, staring at the front door. He thought about Emma upstairs. He thought about Sandra Reeves's voice. You could get your daughter hurt. Daniel turned off the engine and stepped out. The cold air hit his face hard. He welcomed it. It kept him sharp. Inside, he didn't turn on any lights. He moved through the hallway by memory, careful not to make noise. In the living room, the couch still had a blanket thrown over it from the afternoon. Claire's blanket. Emma liked to wrap herself in it when she watched cartoons. Daniel had let her. He stood there for a long moment. Then he went to the kitchen and opened Claire's purse again. He didn't look at it like a sacred object now. He looked at it like evidence. The notebook. The hospital card. He placed both on the table and sat down. The chair creaked. He waited, listening for movement upstairs. Nothing. He opened the notebook again and stared at the names. John Keller. S. Reeves. Then a few other entries he hadn't paid attention to earlier. Short, half-finished notes. Times. Addresses. One line stood out now that he was reading differently. Storage. Unit 41. Don't bring phone. Daniel stared at it. His eyes moved over the handwriting, the pressure of the pen. Claire's hand had been steady when she wrote it. Not panicked, not rushed. That meant she had planned something. Maybe not the crash, but the possibility. Daniel reached for his laptop again and typed in local storage facilities. He narrowed it by distance from Claire's office. It took him 10 minutes before he found a place with unit numbers in the 40s. Riverbend Storage, 25 minutes away. He stared at the screen. The address sat there like it had been waiting for him. He looked up at the clock. 3017 a.m. He could go now. No one would stop him. But then he pictured Emma waking up, walking into an empty kitchen, and the thought made his stomach tighten. He shut the laptop and sat back. He needed to think. He needed to move like someone who wasn't desperate. But he was desperate. That was the problem. Desperation made people careless. Claire had been careful, and still someone had tried to kill her. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands and exhaled slowly. Then he heard something behind him, a soft sound. Bare feet. He turned. Emma stood in the hallway in her pajamas, hair messy, eyes half open. She looked small in the dark. Daniel's chest tightened. "What are you doing up?" he asked quietly. Emma shrugged. Her eyes drifted to the table. "You're sitting there again," she said. Daniel didn't answer right away. Emma stepped closer, slow, like she was tired but curious. "What's that?" she asked, nodding toward the notebook. Daniel hesitated. His instinct was to shut it, hide it, protect her from it. But he remembered what Sandra said. He remembered John's fear. He remembered Jan's name. This wasn't just grief anymore. This was danger. And Emma was already inside it, whether Daniel wanted her to be or not. He closed the notebook gently and slid it toward himself. "Just some things Mom wrote down," he said. Emma climbed onto the chair across from him. Her legs didn't reach the floor. She sat with her hands in her lap, eyes fixed on him. "Are you sad again?" she asked. Daniel looked at her. Her face was serious. Too serious for 8. He swallowed. "I don't know what I am," he said. Emma stared at him a long time. Then she said, "Aunt Mariah said you were going to get sick." Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" Emma shrugged. "She said you weren't eating, that you weren't sleeping. She said I might have to stay with her for a while." Daniel felt something cold move through him. He kept his voice calm. "Did she say when?" Emma shook her head. "Just soon." Daniel's jaw tightened. Mariah had always been pushy, controlling. She liked to feel needed. But this didn't feel like that. This felt like positioning, like she was preparing for something. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Emma, did Aunt Mariah ask you any questions?" Emma frowned. "Like what?" "About Mom. About what she said. About what she did before the accident." Emma thought for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. "She asked if Mom talked to me about secrets." Daniel's stomach dropped. "What did you tell her?" Daniel asked quietly. Emma's eyes widened a little, sensing the shift. "I said no," she whispered, "because Mom didn't tell me secrets." Daniel held her gaze. "You did the right thing," he said. Emma's shoulders relaxed slightly. Then she asked, "Daddy, why does Aunt Mariah hate Mom?" Daniel's throat tightened. He stared at Emma's hands on the table, small, pale, fingernails bitten. He didn't want to answer that. But he also didn't want to lie. "She didn't hate her," Daniel said, then paused. The words felt weak. He corrected himself. "She didn't understand her." Emma blinked. "You didn't either." The sentence landed clean and quiet. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He didn't snap. He didn't deny it. Because Emma wasn't wrong. He stared at her. "How do you know that?" he asked. Emma shrugged again. "You and Mom didn't talk a lot at night. You just sat there." Daniel looked away. He remembered those nights. Claire on the couch, curled under a blanket. Daniel at the table, reading emails, pretending he wasn't watching her. They had shared a house, shared a child, shared years, and still there had been space between them. He told himself it was normal, that marriages settled, that love became quiet. Maybe it had, or maybe he'd let it. Emma yawned, rubbing her eyes. "Go back to bed," Daniel said softly. Emma didn't move. "Is Mom really dead?" she asked. Daniel's breath caught. The question was blunt. No softness. No childish sugarcoating. Just a small person asking for the truth. Daniel stared at her. He felt his mouth go dry. He could lie. He could keep her safe for another day. Another week. But something in him couldn't do it. Not after what he'd learned. Not after realizing everyone else had been lying to them. He leaned forward slightly. "I don't know," he said. Emma's eyes widened. Daniel kept his voice low, controlled. "But I think something about what they told us isn't true." Emma stared at him as if she didn't know what to do with that. Then her face crumpled slightly, not into tears, but into confusion, like the world had shifted. "She wouldn't leave," Emma whispered. Daniel's throat tightened. He nodded once. "I know." Emma swallowed hard. "She promised," Emma said. Daniel felt his eyes burn. He looked down quickly, blinking. "I know," he repeated. Emma slid off the chair and walked around the table. She stood beside Daniel's chair, then leaned into him, pressing her head against his shoulder. Daniel froze for a second. Then his arm came up slowly, wrapping around her. Her body was warm. Small, real. He held her carefully, like she might break. Emma's voice was muffled against his shirt. "If she's alive, why isn't she here?" Daniel didn't answer right away, because the first answers that came to mind were ugly. Because she was afraid. Because she chose to run. Because she thought we could handle it. Because she didn't trust me enough to tell me. Daniel closed his eyes. "She might be trying to protect us," he said quietly. Emma pulled back slightly and looked up at him. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. "That's stupid," she said. Daniel almost laughed. It came out as a short exhale. "Yeah," he said. "It is." Emma wiped her nose with her sleeve. Then she said, "If she's alive, you'll find her." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Daniel looked at her. He didn't give her false comfort. He didn't promise something impossible. He just nodded once. "I'm going to try," he said. Emma stared at him a moment longer, then nodded too, like that was enough. She walked back toward the hallway, slower now. At the doorway she stopped and turned around. "Daddy," she said. Daniel looked up. Emma hesitated. Then she said, "If she comes back, will you be mad?" Daniel stared at her. His mind flashed with the grave. The closed casket. The soil under his hand. The nights alone. The funeral. Mariah's voice. John's fear. He didn't know how to answer. He didn't know what anger even meant anymore. He swallowed. "I don't know," he said honestly. Emma nodded, accepting it in a way only children can. Then she disappeared down the hallway. Daniel stayed at the table long after she went back to bed. He stared at Claire's notebook again, at the storage unit note, at the warning. He felt his body hum with exhaustion, but his mind refused to shut down. At 5 in the morning, he heard a car outside. Headlights swept across the living room wall through the blinds. Daniel's head lifted. The car slowed, stopped. His heart rate spiked. He didn't move. He listened. A door opened. Closed. Footsteps on gravel. Then silence. Daniel stood slowly, careful, and walked to the front window. He pulled the curtain back just enough to see. A car was parked across the street, not in front of his house, not in a driveway, just sitting there. Engine off. Someone inside. Daniel's mouth went dry. He stared hard, trying to see through the windshield. It was too dark. The street light didn't hit it directly. He stood there, barely breathing. Minutes passed. Then the car's engine started. It pulled away slowly, like it had never been there. Daniel let the curtain fall back into place. He stood still. His hands were clenched. His pulse was loud in his ears. He didn't know if it was coincidence, but he didn't believe in coincidence anymore. He walked back to the kitchen and picked up the phone. He didn't call John. He didn't call the police. He opened a new contact and typed a name, Sandra Reeves. He stared at it. Then he deleted it. Because calling her again wouldn't help. She'd already said enough to warn him. He sat back down. His gaze landed on Claire's purse again. He opened it, searching deeper than before. His fingers found something wedged into the lining, something stiff. He pulled it out. A folded piece of paper. Not a receipt, not a note. A photocopy. Daniel unfolded it slowly. His eyes scanned the page. It was a photograph of a document. At the top was an official seal. Below it, a typed heading, Death Certificate. Daniel's throat tightened. He stared at the name, Claire Bennett. But then he saw the line beneath it. Body, not recovered. Daniel's fingers tightened so hard the paper crumpled slightly. He stared at the page until his vision blurred. They had buried an empty coffin. They had carved her name into stone without a body. And someone had made sure he never questioned it. Daniel lowered the paper slowly. His hands were shaking now. Not from fear. From something else. Something that felt like the moment before violence. He stood up and walked to the cabinet above the fridge. He reached inside and pulled out a small lockbox. He hadn't opened it in years. He set it on the table, punched in the code, and lifted the lid. Inside was his old service pistol. He stared at it. He didn't touch it yet. He just looked. Then he closed the box again and pushed it away. Not now. Not like that. He wasn't going to become a man Claire wouldn't recognize. He sat down again. And in the growing daylight, with the house quiet and Emma asleep, Daniel made a decision. He wasn't going to chase Claire, not blindly. He was going to follow what she left behind. He opened the laptop again and typed in the address for Riverbend Storage. Then he checked the time they opened. 8 a.m. He stared at the screen. 3 hours. He could wait. But the thought of sitting still while someone watched his house made his skin crawl. He got up, walked to the hallway, and checked Emma's door, still closed. He listened. Her breathing was steady. He walked back to the kitchen and grabbed a pen. On a small notepad he wrote, "Back soon. Don't open the door for anyone. If Aunt Mariah comes, call me." He hesitated, then added, "I love you." He left the note on the counter where Emma would see it. Then he grabbed his coat and keys. As he stepped outside, the air was colder than before. The sky was pale. The world looked washed clean. Daniel locked the door behind him. He stood on the porch for a moment, scanning the street. Nothing. No car. No movement. But he felt watched anyway. He walked to his car and got in. When the engine started, the sound felt loud in the quiet neighborhood. He backed out and drove toward Riverbend Storage. His hands were steady again. His face was blank. But inside him, something had hardened into shape. A week ago, he'd been a man at a grave. Now, he was a man following a trail his wife had left behind. And the only thing he knew for sure was this. Someone had wanted Claire erased. Not just dead. Erased. And if Daniel kept pulling, he was going to find out why. Even if the answer destroyed whatever was left of his life. Claire had chosen the name Anna Ward because it didn't feel like her. That had been the point. She sat in the corner booth of a roadside diner 2 towns over, a chipped mug of coffee cooling in front of her, watching the window without appearing to watch it. Morning traffic moved past in slow streaks. Delivery trucks. A school bus. A woman jogging with headphones on. Normal life. She kept her hands folded in her lap to stop them from shaking. Daniel would have noticed the shaking. He always noticed the physical things, the tightness in her jaw, the way she pressed her tongue to the inside of her cheek when she was anxious. He noticed, but didn't ask. That had been their rhythm. Claire stared into the coffee. 2 days ago, John had told her Daniel was asking questions. She hadn't been surprised. She'd counted on Daniel being tired, being overwhelmed, being practical. She had not counted on him feeling something was wrong. That part had unsettled her. It meant she had misjudged him, or maybe she had underestimated the weight of a closed coffin. Her phone, one of three she rotated, lay on the table beside the mug. Screen dark. Battery half full. She hadn't turned it on since last night. The less signal, the better. Across the diner, a television mounted in the corner played the morning news. The volume was low, captions running beneath the anchor's face. Claire tried not to look at it. Every time she saw her own name in print, something inside her recoiled. She had watched her death announced 3 separate times. First on a scrolling news ticker, then in a short segment about a tragic accident, then in the obituary section online. It had felt surreal, detached, like watching someone else's story, until Emma's photo had appeared beside hers, survived by her husband and daughter. That line had broken something in her. She hadn't allowed herself to think about Emma too long after that. Thinking made her want to go home, and going home would get them killed. Claire lifted the mug and took a slow sip. The coffee was bitter. She welcomed the taste. It grounded her. The bell above the diner door jingled. She didn't turn her head immediately. She counted to 3 first. Then she glanced toward the entrance casually. A man in a dark jacket stepped inside. Mid-40s. Short hair. Neutral expression. Her pulse spiked anyway. She lowered her gaze back to the table. Don't stare. Don't look afraid. He walked to the counter, ordered something, sat with his back to her. Claire watched his reflection in the chrome napkin holder. He wasn't looking at her. She let out a slow breath. Fear had become constant. Not loud, not dramatic, just a hum under her skin. She paid in cash. She always paid in cash. As she stood, she caught her reflection in the window. Shorter hair now, dyed darker, no wedding ring, different jacket. She looked like someone else. That had been the investigator's instruction. Change the silhouette first. He had said it calmly, like a man giving advice about furniture. His name was Marcus Vance. She didn't know much about him beyond that. John had found him through someone he trusted. Off the books. Quiet. When Claire had crawled away from the burning car and called John with shaking fingers, she hadn't known what she was doing. She had only known one thing. If the crash had been meant to kill her, then whoever planned it believed she was dead. That was leverage. Marcus had agreed. You have one advantage, he'd told her the night they met in an empty warehouse parking lot. They think you're gone. Claire had nodded, hugging her arms around herself. And if I go back, you won't get a second attempt. The memory still made her stomach turn. She left the diner and stepped into the morning air. Cool. Damp. She walked to a borrowed Caradel gray sedan registered under a name she didn't recognize and unlocked it. Before getting in, she scanned the street. No one obvious. No one lingering. She slid into the driver's seat and locked the doors. Her hands rested on the steering wheel for a moment before she started the engine. She thought about Daniel. The last time she'd seen him clearly, he had been standing in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, rinsing plates after dinner. Emma had been at the table doing homework. Claire had watched them both and felt something tighten in her chest. She had almost told him then. Almost. She had almost said, "Something is wrong at work. I think someone is moving money. I think I'm in over my head." But Daniel had been tired that night. He'd had a long shift. And Claire had told herself she could handle it. She had always handled things quietly. It was easier than arguing. Easier than explaining. Now she sat in a car that wasn't hers, wearing a name that wasn't hers, listening to news reports about her own death. Daniel would hate that. He hated being left out of decisions. But he also hated chaos. And what she'd done was chaos. Her burner phone buzzed suddenly. Claire flinched. She stared at it for a full second before picking it up. Unknown number. Her pulse quickened. She let it ring twice more. Then she answered without speaking. Silence on the other end. Then a voice. Storage unit was opened. Marcus. Claire's grip tightened. When? 40 minutes ago. Her stomach dropped. Who? A man. Mid-30s. Dark hair. Stayed 12 minutes. Claire's breath caught. Daniel. It had to be Daniel. He didn't take anything, Marcus continued. He looked through files, photographed some documents. Claire closed her eyes briefly. Of course he did. He came alone, Marcus said. No tail. Claire exhaled slowly. He's not supposed to be there, she said. Marcus was quiet for a beat. You didn't account for him, he said. Claire's jaw tightened. I accounted for his safety. That's not the same. Claire looked out the windshield. Traffic passed like nothing in the world had shifted. What did he see? She asked. Enough. Her throat went dry. Marcus's voice lowered slightly. If he keeps moving in a straight line, he'll hit Hale within 48 hours. Claire's heart pounded harder. No, she said immediately. You can't stop him now, Marcus replied. He's already looking. Claire felt a wave of something heavy move through her. Fear. Not for herself. For Daniel. He's not trained for this, she said. Marcus didn't soften his tone. He's trained enough. Claire closed her eyes again. Daniel had been in the service years ago. She didn't like thinking about that time. He didn't talk about it much. She knew enough to understand that he was capable when cornered. But capability didn't mean immunity. Hale's watching, Marcus said. You know that. Claire's stomach twisted. Is he watching the house? She asked. Yes. The word landed flat. Claire gripped the phone tighter. And Emma. Marcus paused. Indirectly. Claire felt heat rush to her face. That's not acceptable, she said. It's reality. Claire swallowed hard. She had told herself that by removing herself, she was removing the target. But if Daniel started digging publicly, Hale would respond. Marcus's voice shifted slightly, more measured now. You have two options, he said. Stay hidden and let him escalate. Or intervene. Claire stared ahead. Intervene meant revealing herself. It meant undoing the one advantage she had. If I show myself, she said slowly, Hale knows the crash failed. He already suspects, Marcus replied. You didn't burn completely. Claire felt her stomach turn. Don't, she said quietly. Marcus didn't apologize. The point is, he continued, the illusion has a lifespan. It's ending. Claire pressed her free hand against her forehead. She pictured Daniel standing at her grave. She pictured him alone in the kitchen. She pictured Emma asking questions. Guilt moved through her like something physical. I was supposed to protect them, she murmured. You still can, Marcus said, but not by pretending. Claire opened her eyes. What's Hale doing? She asked. Quiet, Marcus replied. Too quiet. He hasn't pushed back publicly. That tells me he's assessing. Claire nodded slowly. Hale had always been controlled, measured. He didn't make loud moves. He made permanent ones. Where is Daniel now? She asked. At home. Claire's breath steadied slightly. For now. Marcus let that hang. Claire stared at the steering wheel. If Daniel went after Hale directly, it would become personal. And Hale did not respond well to personal threats. Claire thought about the files Daniel had likely seen in the storage unit. Transaction logs, emails, copies of grant reallocations. Enough to raise questions. Not enough to survive the answers. I need to see him, she said finally. Marcus didn't argue. You'll compromise the strategy, he said. Claire nodded. I know. You're certain. Claire's jaw set. No, she said. But I'm not certain about staying away either. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, if you go back, you don't go as Anna Ward. Claire's chest tightened. No. You go as Claire Bennett, he said, and you accept the fallout. Claire closed her eyes again. She felt the weight of that. If she returned, she couldn't vanish again easily. She would become a target in full light. But Daniel was already stepping into it blind. She opened her eyes. When can you move me? She asked. Marcus's voice remained steady. Tonight. Claire nodded once, even though he couldn't see her. Then we don't wait, she said. She ended the call and set the phone down on the passenger seat. Her hands trembled openly now. She leaned back in the seat and let her head rest against it. She had imagined this differently. She had imagined staying gone long enough for Hale to make a mistake, long enough for investigators to gather proof, long enough for the danger to dull. But Daniel had shifted the timeline, because Daniel didn't sit still when something felt wrong. She let out a shaky breath. Then she started the car and pulled onto the road. As she drove, she didn't turn on the radio. She didn't look at the news. She focused on the road ahead. Because by nightfall, she would no longer be a ghost, and she didn't know if Daniel would look at her with relief, or with something harder. Daniel didn't go to work. He called in sick without explaining. His supervisor didn't ask questions. People tended not to ask Daniel questions when his voice sounded like that. After Riverbend storage, he'd come home with his head full of paper and numbers and names he didn't fully understand, but he understood enough to feel the shape of it. Claire had been building a case, not just suspicion, not just worry, a case. He spent the morning at the kitchen table, laptop open, documents spread out in front of him like a map. Some of it was photocopied emails, printed late at night. Some of it was internal reports with handwritten notes in the margins. Claire's handwriting, tight and controlled, but she'd been forcing herself to stay calm while reading things that made her skin crawl. There were transfers between accounts with harmless names, research development, outreach, infrastructure. But the numbers didn't behave like real funding. They moved too quickly. They moved in circles. And one name kept appearing at the bottom of approvals: Richard Hale. Daniel sat there, eyes burning from staring at the screen too long, and felt something shift deeper than anger. He felt stupid. Not because he hadn't noticed, because he hadn't wanted to. Claire had been living beside him with something heavy in her hands, and he had let the silence be normal. Emma came down around 9. She padded into the kitchen in socks, hair messy, still half asleep. She climbed onto her chair, grabbed the cereal box, poured herself a bowl without asking. Daniel watched her. She ate quietly, eyes flicking to the papers on the table. "What are those?" she asked. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He was careful now, not because he wanted to hide things, but because he was starting to understand how easily a child could become a target without realizing it. "Just work stuff," he said. Emma frowned. "Mom's work stuff?" Daniel's jaw tightened. He nodded once. Emma stared at the papers longer. Then she asked, "Are you going to find her today?" Daniel's throat tightened. He looked away briefly. "I'm trying," he said. Emma nodded, satisfied, and went back to eating. It was strange how quickly she accepted things, like her brain was building a new normal every day because she didn't have a choice. At 10, the doorbell rang. Daniel froze. Emma looked up from her bowl. The sound wasn't loud, but it cut through the house like a blade. Daniel stood slowly, eyes fixed on a front door. He didn't move toward it right away. He walked to the window first and looked out through the blinds. Mariah's car, parked at the curb like she owned the street. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. He opened the door but didn't step outside. Mariah stood on the porch holding a paper bag. She had her hair pulled back neatly, coat buttoned, lipstick perfect. She looked like someone going to a meeting, not someone visiting her dead sister's family. "Daniel," she said softly, like she was entering a hospital room. "I brought breakfast." Daniel didn't smile. "I'm not hungry," he said. Mariah's eyes flicked past him into the house. "Is Emma up?" Daniel didn't answer right away. "Yes," he said. Mariah's face softened. Or tried to. "I thought I'd take her for the day," she said. "Give you some time. You look exhausted." Daniel's grip tightened on the edge of the door. "We're fine," he said. Mariah's smile thinned. "Daniel," she said again, still gentle, still controlled. "You can't keep doing this alone." Daniel stared at her. Her voice was kind. Her expression was kind, but something about it felt rehearsed, like she practiced this version of herself in the mirror. He kept his tone neutral. "What do you want, Mariah?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I want to help." Daniel nodded slowly, as if he believed her. Then he said, "Did you know the death certificate says body not recovered?" Mariah didn't blink. Not immediately, but her mouth tightened a fraction of an inch. A small slip. Daniel saw it. He felt his stomach drop. "I didn't handle the certificate," she said. Daniel held her gaze. "You handled everything else." Mariah's posture stiffened. She set the paper bag down on the porch slowly, like she didn't trust her hands. "Daniel," she said quietly, "you need to stop digging." There it was. The same sentence John had said. The same sentence Sandra had said. Stop digging. Daniel felt his heart beat slow. "Why?" he asked. Mariah's eyes flicked over his face, reading him. "You're grieving," she said. "You're looking for reasons. It's normal, but it isn't healthy." Daniel's voice stayed calm. "I saw a car outside the house last night." Mariah's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. "A car," she repeated. Daniel nodded. "Sat across the street. Left before dawn." Mariah's lips parted slightly. Then she closed them again. Her voice came out controlled. "Daniel, you're paranoid." Daniel stared at her. Then he said, "Are you scared because I'm paranoid or because I'm right?" Mariah's jaw clenched. The second passed. 2. Then she took a step closer. "Don't do this," she whispered. Daniel didn't move. "What are you hiding?" he asked. Mariah's face hardened. "I'm not hiding anything." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "You didn't like Claire," he said. Mariah's eyes flashed. "That's not true." Daniel's voice stayed even. "Emma thinks you hated her." Mariah's face tightened like she'd been slapped. Emma appeared behind Daniel in the hallway, peeking around his hip. Her eyes were wide. Mariah saw her and immediately softened her expression again. "Hi, sweetheart," Mariah said brightly. "I brought you pancakes." Emma didn't smile. She looked at Daniel instead. Daniel felt something twist inside him. Mariah stepped forward as if she was going to come inside. Daniel blocked the doorway. Mariah stopped. "Daniel," she said, her voice sharper now, "you're making this harder than it needs to be." Daniel leaned slightly closer. "I want you to leave," he said. Mariah's eyes narrowed. "I'm family," she said. Daniel nodded once, and so was Claire. Mariah's throat moved as she swallowed. She glanced past him again, scanning the kitchen, the table. Daniel realized she was looking for something. The papers, the notebook, evidence. He felt his hands tighten. Mariah's gaze returned to his face. "You're not thinking clearly," she said. Daniel's voice dropped. "You came here to check what I know." Mariah's smile vanished. She looked tired suddenly. Not grief-tired. Something else. A kind of stress she'd been holding too tightly. "You're going to ruin everything," she whispered. Daniel's eyes sharpened. "Everything," he repeated. "What is everything?" Mariah's lips pressed together. Then she stepped back slowly. "Fine," she said. "If you don't want help, I can't force it." She picked up the paper bag again. Her voice softened, almost pleading. "Just take care of Emma." Daniel stared at her. "I am," he said. Mariah nodded once. Then she turned and walked down the porch steps. Daniel watched her reach her car. Before she got in, she turned back. Her eyes met his, and for a second, the mask slipped completely. There was fear there. Real fear. Then she got in the car and drove away. Daniel shut the door and locked it. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the deadbolt like it might not be enough. Emma tugged lightly on his sleeve. Daniel looked down. "What?" he asked. Emma's voice was quiet. "She knows something," she said. Daniel stared at her. He didn't correct her. He just nodded once. "Yeah," he said. "I think she does." Emma looked up at him, serious. "Is she bad?" Daniel hesitated. He didn't want to call Mariah bad. Not in front of Emma. Not like that. But he couldn't lie either. "I don't know," he said, "but she's not safe right now." Emma's face tightened. She looked toward the door like she expected Mariah to come back. Daniel rested a hand on her shoulder gently. "Go upstairs," he said. "Pack a small bag." Emma blinked. "Why?" Daniel kept his voice calm. "Just in case we need to leave for a night." Emma didn't argue. She nodded and ran upstairs. Daniel returned to the kitchen table. His hands moved quickly now. He gathered Claire's documents into a folder. He grabbed his laptop, the notebook. Then he walked to the lockbox and opened it again. He stared at the gun. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he reached in and lifted it. It was heavier than he remembered. Cold. He checked the magazine without thinking. Habit. Muscle memory. Loaded. He stared at it. Then he set it back in the box and closed the lid. Not yet. But he couldn't pretend it wasn't part of his world anymore. He grabbed his phone and called John. John answered immediately, voice tense. "Daniel?" "She came here," Daniel said. John went silent. "Mariah," Daniel continued. "She told me to stop digging." John's voice dropped. "She knows?" Daniel's stomach tightened. "You tell me," Daniel said. John exhaled sharply. "Daniel," he said, "I told you not to go after Hale." Daniel's jaw clenched. "You think I'm going after Hale," Daniel said. "I think Hale's already coming after me." John swore under his breath. "You need to leave the house," John said. Daniel's eyes flicked toward the staircase. "I'm already packing," he said. John's voice was urgent now. "Listen to me. You need to get Emma somewhere safe, somewhere Hale can't reach easily." Daniel's voice was quiet. "There isn't anywhere," he said. John paused. Then he said, "Yes, there is." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Where?" John hesitated, then said, "There's a cabin. Outside the city. Claire used it once, a few years ago. She rented it under her name for a weekend." Daniel felt a sharp twist in his chest. He hadn't known that. Of course he hadn't. "Where is it?" Daniel asked. John gave him the address. Daniel wrote it down. His hand was steady. He didn't feel anything now except movement. Decision. Emma came back downstairs 10 minutes later with a backpack. Her favorite stuffed rabbit was sticking out the top. She stood in the hallway looking at Daniel like she was waiting for permission to be scared. Daniel walked to her and crouched. He adjusted the straps on her shoulders. "Listen," he said softly. "We're going to go for a drive, just for a little while." Emma nodded. "Is Mom there?" she asked. Daniel froze. The question hit him so cleanly he couldn't answer immediately. He swallowed. "I don't know," he said. Emma stared at him. Then she nodded again, accepting it. Daniel stood, grabbed the folder, laptop, and keys. He turned off the lights. He checked the locks twice. Then he led Emma out to the car. As he backed out of the driveway, he glanced at the house, the porch, the windows, the quiet street. He felt something in his chest tighten, because he knew the next time he came back, nothing would be the same. He drove toward the highway. Emma sat in the back seat, holding her rabbit tightly. Daniel's phone buzzed once. Unknown number. His heart stopped for a second. He didn't answer. It buzzed again. Then a message came through. No name, no ID, just a single line. "Don't go to Hale." Daniel stared at the screen. His grip tightened on the wheel. His mouth went dry. Then another message. "It's me." Daniel's breath caught. He almost swerved. He pulled onto the shoulder and stopped the car so abruptly, Emma jolted. "Daddy," she said, alarmed. Daniel didn't respond. His hands shook as he stared at the screen. Another message appeared. "Please, you're making it worse." Daniel's throat tightened painfully. He stared at the words until his vision blurred. Then he typed back with shaking fingers. "Where are you?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Daniel held his breath. The reply came. "Behind you." Daniel's head snapped up. He looked in the rear-view mirror. A car was pulled in behind them on the shoulder. Gray sedan. Engine running. Daniel's chest tightened. Emma turned around in her seat, looking through the back window. Her small voice went thin. "Daddy." Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles whitened. The gray sedan's driver door opened. A woman stepped out. Dark hair, shorter than he remembered, wearing a coat too big for her frame. She stood there for a moment, just looking at Daniel's car. Then she started walking forward slowly. Daniel couldn't breathe. His mind refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. He stared as she reached the passenger side window. She didn't knock. She just stood there, her face pale, lips pressed together, eyes locked on him. Daniel's hands trembled as he reached for the window button. The glass lowered halfway. The cold air rushed in. Claire's voice came out quiet. "Daniel," she said. His throat tightened so hard he couldn't speak. He stared at her. Her eyes looked the same. Tired. Haunted. Alive. Emma's voice came from the back seat, shaking. "Mom?" Claire's face broke slightly at the sound. Her hand lifted to the window edge, fingers trembling. "Hi, baby," she whispered. Emma made a small sound, half gasp, half sob. She tried to unbuckle. Daniel's voice finally came out, rough and low. "What the hell did you do?" he said. Claire flinched like he'd struck her. She swallowed. "I didn't have a choice," she whispered. Daniel stared at her. His eyes burned. His hand shook. He couldn't decide if he wanted to pull her into the car or slam the window shut. Claire's gaze flicked toward Emma, then back to him. Her voice cracked slightly. "I'm sorry," she said. Daniel laughed once, sharp and bitter, then stopped. His face tightened. "You let me bury you," he said. Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. She nodded faintly. "I know," she whispered. Daniel's breathing came fast now. His chest hurt. Emma's small voice broke behind him. "Mom, come inside." Claire's lips trembled. She looked at Emma like she was starving, but she didn't move. She stayed outside. Because she knew what she was, a danger. Daniel's voice dropped low. "Who's watching you?" he asked. Claire's eyes flicked toward the road, then back. "Everyone," she said. Daniel stared at her. Claire swallowed hard. "You have to listen to me," she whispered. "You have to stop. Hale isn't the only one." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then tell me," he said. Claire looked at him, eyes wide, desperate, and for the first time since she died, Daniel saw something he hadn't seen in her before. Real fear. Not stress. Not worry. Fear. Claire leaned closer to the window and whispered, "Mariah is involved." Daniel went still. His entire body stiffened. Emma's voice behind him was trembling, confused. "What does that mean?" Claire's hand gripped the edge of the window. She looked at Daniel, and her voice came out barely audible. "She sold me." Daniel didn't speak for a long time. His hands stayed on the steering wheel. His eyes stayed on Claire. He watched her mouth, her breathing, the way her shoulders rose and fell under that oversized coat, like she was cold down to the bone. "She sold me." The words sat in the air between them. Daniel's brain refused to accept them at first. It tried to find another meaning, another interpretation, something less ugly. But Claire's face didn't leave room for that. Her eyes were wide, glassy but controlled, like she was holding herself together by force. "Daniel," she said quietly, "you have to believe me." He finally blinked. His voice came out flat. "I'm looking at you." Claire swallowed. Emma was still in the back seat, half twisted around, staring at her mother through the open window. Her hands were gripping the seatbelt straps like she was afraid if she moved, Claire would vanish again. "Mom," Emma whispered. Claire's eyes flicked to her and softened for a second. Something in her face broke, and she looked away quickly, as if she couldn't afford that softness. Daniel noticed. "Aberek." "Get in the car," Daniel said. Claire didn't move. "I can't," she said. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You can." Claire shook her head slightly. "If someone's tracking this car, no one's tracking this car, no one's tracking this car," Daniel snapped. Claire flinched. Then her voice dropped. You don't know that. Daniel stared at her. He could feel his pulse pounding behind his eyes. He wanted to grab her arm, drag her into the passenger seat, lock the doors, drive until there was nothing left behind them but road. But he didn't. Because Claire's fear wasn't irrational. It was practiced. It was the kind of fear that came from being hunted. Daniel forced himself to breathe slowly. "Where's your car?" he asked. Claire nodded toward the gray sedan behind them. Daniel glanced in the rearview mirror. The sedan was plain, clean. No plates on the front. The kind of car you didn't remember seeing. He looked back at Claire. "Who gave you that?" he asked. Claire hesitated. "Someone helping me," she said. Daniel's voice hardened. "Who?" Claire's eyes tightened. "I don't have time to explain everything," she said. "Not here." Daniel stared at her. His mouth went dry. He looked at Emma again. Emma's face was pale. Her eyes were wet now, tears spilling down without sound. She was still staring at Claire like she didn't trust her eyes. Daniel felt something twist in his chest. He turned back to Claire. "Emma's coming with you," he said. Claire shook her head quickly. "No." Daniel's eyes sharpened. "No?" Karen's voice broke slightly. "I can't take her. I can't drag her into this." Daniel leaned forward, lowering his voice. "She's already in it," he said, "because of you." Claire's face tightened. Her lips pressed together. She looked like she wanted to argue, but the argument didn't come. She just nodded faintly, like she couldn't deny it. Daniel's voice dropped further. "Get in the car." Claire hesitated one more second. Then she reached for the passenger door handle. Daniel unlocked it. The door opened, and she slid inside quickly, pulling it shut like she was afraid to leave it open too long. The moment she was inside, Emma let out a sound that didn't fully become a sob. She unbuckled her seatbelt and climbed forward between the seats, small hands grabbing Claire's shoulders. Claire froze. Her whole body went rigid. Then Emma buried her face in Claire's neck. "Mom!" Emma cried softly, like the word had been trapped inside her for days. Claire's eyes squeezed shut. Her hands hovered in the air for a second, uncertain, like she didn't deserve to touch her. Then she wrapped her arms around Emma carefully. She held her too tightly at first, then loosened slightly, then tightened again. Her breathing was uneven. Daniel watched the two of them. He felt something in him split open. Not relief, not happiness. Something raw. Like his body didn't know how to hold this kind of moment after believing it was impossible. Claire kissed Emma's hair, over and over. Not dramatic, just small, desperate touches like she needed proof. Emma clung to her. Daniel's voice came out low. "Seatbelt," he said. Emma didn't move. Claire whispered, "Baby, you have to sit back." Emma shook her head violently. "No," she said. "No, I'm not letting you go again." Claire's throat tightened. Daniel turned his head away for a second and stared out the windshield. Traffic moved past them. People driving to work. People thinking about nothing. He wondered what it would feel like to be one of them again. Claire finally managed to guide Emma back into the rear seat. She helped buckle her in with shaking hands. Emma kept reaching forward, touching Claire's arm, her shoulder, like she needed to keep contact. Daniel started the car. He pulled back onto the highway slowly. He didn't know where he was going yet. He just knew staying on the shoulder was a mistake. Claire sat stiff in the passenger seat, hands folded in her lap. She kept looking out the side mirror. Daniel watched her eyes. She was scanning, not daydreaming, not avoiding him. Scanning. That alone told him how serious this was. Emma's voice came from the back, small and trembling. "Are you real?" Claire swallowed. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm real." Emma started crying harder then. Quiet, shaking sobs. Claire twisted in her seat and reached back, holding Emma's hand without looking. Daniel drove in silence. His mind was racing too fast to form clean thoughts. He wanted to scream. He wanted to pull over and throw up. He wanted to stop the car and ask her 100 questions until something inside him felt stable again. But he didn't. He kept driving. because if Claire was this scared, then time mattered. After 15 minutes, Daniel took an exit toward a quieter road. Trees replaced buildings. The highway noise faded behind them. He glanced at Claire. Her eyes were fixed ahead now, jaw clenched. "Talk," Daniel said. Claire flinched slightly at the tone. Daniel kept his eyes on the road. "You said Mariah's involved," he continued. "Explain." Claire's throat worked as she swallowed. "She's not just involved," Claire said quietly. "She's the reason it happened." Daniel's hands tightened on the wheel. Emma's sobbing quieted. She listened. Daniel felt his voice go cold. "How?" he asked. Claire stared at the dashboard. "She knew about the files," Claire said. "I didn't tell her directly, but she knew something was wrong. She always listened too hard, asked questions that didn't match what I'd said." Daniel's jaw clenched. Claire continued, her voice low. "I thought she was just being herself. Nosy. Controlling. I didn't take it seriously." Daniel didn't interrupt. Claire's eyes flicked to him. "I told her I was tired," she said. "That work was stressful." And she started pushing, asking what kind of stress, asking what I'd seen. Daniel's throat tightened. "And you told her," he said. Claire's voice cracked slightly. "Not everything." Daniel's grip tightened. "Enough," he said. Claire nodded faintly. "I didn't even realize what I'd done," she whispered. "Until I got a call from Hale." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Hale called you?" Claire nodded. "He'd never called me directly before," she said. "He always went through managers, through layers." Daniel's stomach turned. "What did he say?" Claire's voice dropped. "He asked if I was feeling okay," she said. "If I'd been sleeping, if I was overwhelmed." Daniel felt anger rise. Hale's voice in his mind smooth, paternal. Claire continued. "He told me he admired my attention to detail. He said people like me were valuable." Daniel's jaw tightened. "That's when I knew," Claire whispered. "Because it wasn't praise. It was a warning." Daniel stared at the road. Emma's breathing was shaky behind them. Claire swallowed hard. "A day later," she said, "Mariah came over unannounced." Daniel's chest tightened. Claire's hands clenched together in her lap. "She was too nice," Claire said. "Too calm. She brought food. Asked about Emma. Asked about you." Daniel glanced at her. Claire's eyes were glassy now, but she kept her voice controlled. "She asked if I was scared," Claire said. And I remember thinking, why would she ask that? Daniel felt his skin prickle. Claire continued. "She told me she could help. That she knew people. That if something was wrong, I didn't have to go through official channels." Daniel's mouth went dry. "That's when I realized she wasn't worried," Claire said. "She was fishing." Daniel's voice was tight. "So you cut her off?" Claire shook her head slowly. "No," she whispered. "I didn't. I kept talking." Daniel felt something painful twist in his chest. Claire's voice lowered. "She asked about Hale," Claire said. "She asked if he'd ever made me uncomfortable. She asked if he'd ever threatened me." Daniel's hands tightened. "And you told her," he said again. Claire nodded. "I told her I thought money was being moved," Claire whispered. "I told her I thought someone was laundering to research grants." Daniel's breath came out slow. Claire's eyes closed briefly. "I told her I'd copied files," she said. Daniel's throat tightened. "And then," Daniel said. Claire's voice went quiet. "And then 2 nights later, my brakes failed." The words hit the car like a weight. Daniel's hands jerked slightly on the steering wheel. He felt Emma shift behind him. Claire stared at her lap. "I was driving home," she said. "Not fast, just normal. And when I hit the brake at the intersection, nothing." Daniel's heart pounded. She didn't look at him as she spoke. Like she couldn't. "I pumped it," she said. "I tried again. Nothing. And then I saw headlights behind me too close." Daniel's jaw clenched. "A car," he said. Claire nodded. "They didn't hit me right away," she whispered. "They stayed behind me, like they wanted me to panic." Daniel's breathing slowed. He could picture it too clearly. Claire continued. I pulled on to the rural road because I thought I could lose them. I thought if I could get somewhere with lights, somewhere public. Her voice broke slightly. I didn't make it, she said. Daniel's chest felt tight. And Mariah, he said, where does she come in? Claire finally turned her head toward him. Her eyes were red but dry. She called me an hour before it happened, she whispered. She asked where I was. She said she wanted to drop something off. Daniel felt his blood run cold. She knew, he said. Claire nodded faintly. She knew exactly where I'd be, Claire said. And when I didn't answer her second call, she texted me. Daniel's throat tightened. What did she say? He asked. Claire swallowed. Her voice came out quiet, flat. She said, you should have trusted me. Daniel felt his stomach drop. He stared ahead, blinking slowly. That wasn't manipulation. That was confession. Claire looked down again. I didn't understand until after, she whispered. After the crash. After the fire, when I crawled out and hid in the ditch and watched the car burn. Daniel's grip tightened on the wheel. Her voice dropped lower. I saw someone standing by the road, she said, watching it burn. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Who? Claire hesitated. Then she said, Mariah's boyfriend. Daniel's entire body went cold. He almost hit the brakes without thinking. The car swerved slightly. Daniel corrected. Claire didn't react. She kept her eyes forward. I didn't know it was him at first, she whispered, but I saw his face in the light from the fire, and I knew. Daniel's throat tightened painfully. Emma's voice came from the back seat, small and horrified. And Mariah did that? Claire's face tightened. She looked back at Emma. I don't know if she planned the whole thing, Claire said carefully, but she gave them access to me. She gave them information. Emma started crying again, softer this time, like her body was too tired to make it loud. Daniel's jaw clenched so hard his teeth hurt. He kept driving. He didn't know where he was going anymore. He only knew he needed space, distance, time to think without walls around him. Claire's voice was quieter now. After the fire, she said, I waited until they left. Then I ran. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. Daniel pictured her alone in the dark, hair smelling like smoke, hands shaking, blood on her skin. He felt something sharp in his chest. I called John, Claire whispered, because I didn't know who else to call. And because I knew if I called you, you'd come. Daniel's voice was tight. Yes. Claire nodded. And you'd die, she whispered. Daniel didn't answer, because part of him wanted to deny it. But he couldn't. He would have come. He would have done something stupid and direct and loud. Claire stared out the window. I didn't want Emma to grow up without you, she said quietly. Daniel felt his throat tighten. Emma's hand reached forward again, touching Claire's shoulder. Claire held it. Daniel drove in silence. He felt rage sitting in his stomach like a stone. But underneath the rage was something else now. Something heavier. Claire had been alone in that moment, and Daniel had been at home, unaware, thinking their life was normal. He finally spoke again. Where have you been? He asked. Claire's voice came out flat. Nowhere, she said. Everywhere. Cheap motels, safe houses, cars, places that smell like bleach and old smoke. Daniel glanced at her. Claire's eyes were distant. I watched you bury me, she said suddenly. Daniel's hands tightened on the wheel. He didn't look at her. He couldn't. Claire's voice was quiet, almost numb. I stood behind a tree, she said. Far enough away no one could see me. I watched you stand there like you didn't know how to breathe. Daniel's chest tightened painfully. He felt heat rise behind his eyes. Claire swallowed. I wanted to run to you, she whispered. I almost did. Daniel's voice came out rough. But you didn't. Claire nodded. No, she said. I didn't. Silence again. The car moved through trees and open fields. The road stretched forward, empty. Daniel finally asked the question that had been waiting in him like a blade. "Did you ever plan to come back?" he said. Claire's eyes flicked to him. She didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "I didn't know." Daniel felt that answer land like something breaking. He kept driving. His face stayed still. But inside, something shifted. Because it wasn't just that she had lied. It was that she had lived without knowing as she wanted to return to the life they had built. And Daniel didn't know how to forgive that. Not yet. Not while her hand was still warm on Emma's shoulder. Not while the smell of her hair was still real. He drove another mile before he finally spoke again. "Where are we going?" he asked. Claire looked ahead. Then she said, "Somewhere they can't find us." Daniel let out a slow breath. He didn't know if that place existed. But he kept driving anyway. They didn't speak for the next 20 minutes. Not because there was nothing left to say. Because there was too much. The road narrowed into a 2-lane stretch lined with trees stripped almost bare, late season. The sky hung low and colorless above them. Daniel drove without checking the GPS anymore. Claire gave quiet directions when needed. Left. Stay straight. Slow down here. Emma had stopped crying. She leaned against the window, eyes half closed, one hand still reaching forward, fingers hooked into the fabric of Claire's coat, like she was afraid sleep might erase her. Claire kept glancing back at her. Every time she did, something in her face changed. Not dramatic, just softer. And then it hardened again when she looked forward. Daniel noticed that too. They turned down a gravel road. The sound under the tires was loud in the silence. "There," Claire said quietly. A small cabin came into view through the trees. Wood siding. Dark roof. No neighboring houses within sight. A narrow porch with 2 empty chairs. Daniel pulled up slowly and shut off the engine. The quiet after the engine died felt heavy. No highway noise. No distant traffic. Just wind moving through branches. Claire didn't open her door right away. Neither did Daniel. Emma stirred in the back seat and looked around. "Where are we?" she asked, voice thick with sleep. Claire turned slightly. "Just somewhere quiet." Emma nodded faintly. Daniel finally opened his door and stepped out. The cold air hit his face and cleared his head just enough to function. He walked around to Emma's side and opened the back door. She climbed out slowly, still clutching her rabbit. Claire stepped out last. She stood there for a second, taking in the trees, the distance from everything. Daniel watched her. She looked smaller than he remembered, not physically, but in presence, like something inside her had been carved out during the week she'd been gone. He didn't know how to stand near her yet. He unlocked the cabin door with the spare key John had told him about. The inside smelled like wood and dust. It hadn't been used recently. There was a small kitchen, a narrow hallway, 2 bedrooms. Emma walked in first, looking around carefully. "It's like camping," she said quietly. Daniel closed the door behind them and locked it. Claire stood in the center of the room, arms wrapped around herself. Daniel set the folder of documents on the small dining table. He turned to her. "Start at the part you skipped," he said. Claire met his eyes. "What part?" "The part where you decided I didn't deserve to know." The words weren't shouted. They were worse. They were level. Claire inhaled slowly. "I didn't decide that," she said. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You called John," he said. "You called a stranger. You didn't call me." Claire's eyes flashed briefly. "He wasn't a stranger," she said. "He was already involved." Daniel's voice sharpened slightly. "And I wasn't." Claire flinched. Emma looked between them, confused. Daniel noticed and lowered his voice immediately. "Go pick a room," he told Emma gently. "Whichever one you want." Emma hesitated. Then she nodded and walked down the hallway slowly. They listened until a bedroom door clicked shut. The cabin felt smaller after that. Daniel turned back to Claire. "You thought I'd make it worse," he said. Claire nodded once. "Yes." Daniel's mouth twitched. "At least you're honest now." Claire's shoulders sagged slightly. "I know you," she said. "You don't sit still when something's wrong." Daniel took a step closer. That's called caring. Claire's eyes filled again, but she blinked the tears back. I know, she whispered. Silence settled between them. Daniel studied her face. There were faint scratches near her hairline, a small scar on her wrist he didn't remember. He reached out without thinking and touched it lightly. Claire stiffened. Then she relaxed a fraction. That from the crash? He asked quietly. She nodded. Seatbelt caught, she said. Daniel dropped his hand. He felt something twist in his chest. You almost died, he said. Claire's eyes met his. Yes. The word was simple. Final. Daniel looked away first. He walked to the window and stared out at the trees. I stood at your grave, he said quietly, 3 mornings in a row. Claire closed her eyes. I know, she whispered. He turned back sharply. You watched. It wasn't a question. Claire nodded faintly. I needed to see if it worked, she said. Daniel let out a breath that sounded like a short laugh, but it wasn't humor. So I was a test. Claire shook her head quickly. No. Daniel stepped closer again. Then what was I? Claire looked at him. And for the first time since she'd stepped out of that car, her control slipped. You were the thing I couldn't afford to lose, she said. Daniel's breath caught. Claire's voice trembled now. If I told you, she continued, you would have gone after Hale. You would have confronted him. You would have demanded answers. Daniel didn't deny it. She was right. And then what? Claire whispered. You think men like that lose? Daniel didn't answer. Claire's voice dropped. They crush, she said. Quietly. Daniel felt anger flare again. And running was better? He asked. Claire's shoulders tightened. It bought time. For who? Daniel shot back. For you. Claire flinched. For Emma, she said. Daniel stared at her. She's 8, he said. She buried her mother. Claire's eyes filled fully now. Tears spilled over before she could stop them. I know, she whispered. Daniel felt his own eyes burn. He turned away again, pacing once across the small room. He ran a hand through his hair. You let her think you were gone, he said. Claire nodded slowly. Yes. Daniel stopped pacing. And you didn't know if you'd come back. Claire swallowed. No. The honesty hurt more than anything else. Daniel stood there breathing hard. He wanted to scream at her. He wanted to hold her. He did neither. Instead, he said quietly, You didn't trust me. Claire shook her head quickly. I didn't trust the situation, she said. That's not the same thing. It felt like it was, she whispered. Daniel stared at her. The cabin felt too quiet, too close. He lowered his voice. You think I can't handle danger, he said. Claire's expression changed slightly. No, she said. I think you handle it too well. Daniel frowned. Claire stepped closer, closing some of the distance between them. You go straight at things, she said. You don't step back. You don't calculate. You protect. Daniel's jaw tightened. That's not a flaw. Claire's voice was soft now. It is when someone is trying to bait you. The words hung there. Daniel understood what she meant. Hale hadn't just wanted her gone. He'd wanted a reaction. Public. Emotional. Loud. A grieving husband accusing him would have been easy to discredit. Daniel exhaled slowly. Claire wiped at her face, embarrassed by the tears. I thought if you believed I was dead, she said, you'd stay with Emma. You'd focus on her. You'd move forward. Daniel's voice dropped dangerously low. Move forward from what? Claire stared at him. From me, she whispered. The word hit him harder than the rest. Daniel felt something crack open in his chest. Is that what you wanted? He asked. Claire hesitated. That hesitation told him everything. Daniel stepped back slightly. You were already halfway gone, he said. Claire shook her head quickly. No. Daniel's voice sharpened. You rented this cabin without telling me. You were copying files, meeting people, living a second life. Claire's face tightened. I didn't want to worry you. Daniel laughed once, short and bitter. You think I'm not worried now? Claire didn't respond. Silence stretched again. From down the hallway, Emma's voice floated out faintly. Mom? Claire's head snapped toward the sound. Coming, she called softly. She looked back at Daniel. Her voice dropped. I'm sorry, she said. Daniel studied her face. Not polished, not defensive, just tired. I didn't plan to leave you, she added quietly. I planned to survive. Daniel felt something shift again. He nodded once, slowly. Then survive with us, he said. Claire's breath caught. I don't know how, she whispered. Daniel looked toward the hallway where Emma was waiting. Start there, he said. Claire swallowed. Then she nodded. She walked down the hallway. Daniel stood alone in the cabin for a moment. He leaned his hands on the table and closed his eyes. He wasn't sure what he felt anymore. Anger, yes. Relief, yes. But also something deeper. He had built a version of Claire in his head during the week she was gone. A memory. A loss. A fixed thing. Now she was moving again. Complicated. Flawed. Scared. Alive. And that was harder than mourning. He opened his eyes and walked toward the hallway. He paused outside the bedroom. Claire sat on the edge of the bed. Emma stood between her knees, holding her face in both hands like she was studying it. You're really here, Emma said. Claire nodded, voice breaking. I am. Emma leaned forward and hugged her again. Daniel watched from the doorway. He didn't step in. He just stood there. Because for the first time since this began, the danger outside didn't feel like the only threat. There was damage in this room too, and it wasn't going to be solved by hiding. Claire looked up and saw him watching. Their eyes met. There was no strategy in that look, no plan. Just two people who had hurt each other, trying to decide if they could still stand on the same side. Daniel didn't smile. But he didn't look away either. Outside, wind moved through the trees. The cabin stood quiet. For now. But Daniel knew something with certainty as he stood there watching his wife hold their daughter. Hale wasn't going to wait forever, and neither were they. Claire didn't sleep much that night. Daniel could tell without asking. She moved through the cabin like a person listening for something that wasn't there. Every creak of wood underfoot made her shoulders tighten. Every time wind hit the windows, her eyes flicked toward the sound. Emma fell asleep quickly, exhausted from crying. She curled up in the small bed in the second room with her rabbit tucked under her chin, like the last week had finally caught up to her body. Daniel stayed in the living room. Claire sat on the couch across from him, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around herself. She wore one of his old sweatshirts. It hung loose on her frame. Daniel watched her hands. She kept rubbing her thumb against her palm like she was trying to wipe something off. The cabin was quiet except for the faint ticking of an old wall clock. At some point after midnight, Claire spoke. I didn't want you to see me like this. Daniel didn't look up from where he was sitting. Too late, he said. Claire's mouth twitched slightly, but it wasn't a smile. She nodded. Daniel stared at the floor. He could still see her stepping out of the gray sedan on the highway shoulder. He could still hear Emma's voice when she said, Mom? Like the word was tearing itself out of her chest. Daniel had expected this moment to feel like a miracle. It didn't. It felt like being handed something fragile after already grieving its loss. He didn't trust his hands. Claire cleared her throat. I know you're angry, she said quietly. Daniel's jaw tightened. That's not even the right word, he said. Claire's eyes lowered. Daniel let the silence sit. He could feel the anger in him, but it was buried under other things. Confusion. Exhaustion. A kind of slow grief that hadn't gone away, only changed shape. Claire shifted slightly on the couch. I saw the obituary, she whispered. Daniel's eyes lifted to her. Claire's voice was careful. I didn't know Mariah would put Emma's name in it. Daniel stared at her. You didn't know, he repeated. Claire flinched at the tone. I didn't know, she said again, firmer now. Marcus told me they needed it to look real. he said. The less doubt, the safer you'd be. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Marcus, he said, this investigator. Claire nodded. Daniel watched her. You trust him. Claire hesitated, then nodded again. I don't trust anyone, she said, but he's kept me alive. Daniel exhaled slowly. Is he watching us now? He asked. Claire's gaze flicked to the window. I don't know, she admitted. Daniel nodded once. The fact that she didn't know made his stomach tighten. Claire swallowed. I didn't come here to stay hidden, she said. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. Then why are you here? Claire looked at him. Because you were moving too fast, she said. And because if you keep going alone, you'll die. Daniel didn't respond. Claire's voice lowered. And Emma will lose both of us. That landed. Daniel looked away. Claire leaned forward slightly. I need you to listen, she said. Not argue, just listen. Daniel's mouth tightened. Go ahead. Claire's hands clenched together. The foundation isn't just laundering money, she said. It's funding clinical trials that don't exist. Daniel frowned. Claire continued, voice steady now. They're filing grants for research programs that are never conducted. The money disappears, but it's not just stolen, it's routed. Daniel's eyes stayed on her. To who? He asked. Claire hesitated. Then she said, people who don't want their names in official systems. Daniel felt a slow chill spread through him. Claire swallowed. I found a set of invoices, she said. Payments to a consulting group that doesn't exist. The address is a shell. The phone number goes nowhere. Daniel nodded slowly. That's what you copied, he said. Claire nodded. Yes. Daniel's jaw tightened. And you went to the prosecutor. Claire's eyes flickered. I tried, she whispered. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Tried, he repeated. Claire exhaled. I met with an assistant prosecutor, she said. Not the main office. Someone lower. Someone who seemed interested. Daniel watched her face. Claire's voice dropped. 2 days later, I got a call from a blocked number. A man told me to stop asking questions. He said he knew where Emma went to school. Daniel's throat tightened. Claire's face stayed controlled, but her fingers trembled slightly. I didn't tell you, she said quietly, because I didn't want you to look at her differently, like she was fragile. Daniel swallowed hard. He could picture it. Emma's school, the drop-off lane, the playground. The idea of a stranger knowing her schedule made him feel sick. Claire continued. That's when I started hiding copies of everything. That's when I rented the storage unit. Daniel nodded once. So Hale wasn't bluffing, Daniel said. Claire shook her head slowly. No, she whispered. He wasn't bluffing. He never bluffs. Daniel stared at her. And Mariah, he said. Claire's jaw tightened. I didn't want to believe it, she said. Even after the crash, even after I saw her boyfriend. I kept telling myself it could be coincidence. Daniel's voice was flat. It wasn't. Claire's eyes lifted. No, she admitted. Daniel waited. Claire swallowed. She's in debt, Claire said quietly. Daniel frowned. Debt? Claire nodded. She gambles, she said. Not casinos, online. Sports, high stakes. She owes people money. Daniel stared at her, stunned. He had never known that. He'd never even considered it. Claire's voice stayed low. She told me once it was just a little, just for fun. But I saw her phone one day. Messages. Threats. I didn't say anything. Daniel felt his stomach twist. You knew, he said. Claire nodded faintly. I thought it was her problem, she whispered. I didn't realize it would become mine. Daniel leaned back slightly. His eyes burned. He didn't feel like yelling anymore. He felt tired. Claire's voice softened. When Hale found out I was collecting files, she said, I think he offered her a way out, a deal. Daniel's jaw clenched. Give them access, he murmured. Claire nodded. She didn't have to plan the crash, Claire said. She just had to tell them where I was, what roads I took, what time I left work. Daniel stared at the wall. He pictured Mariah at the funeral again. Her calm face, her gentle voice, her hand on his arm. He felt nauseous. Claire watched him. "I'm sorry," she said. Daniel's eyes flicked to her. "For what?" he asked. Claire's voice trembled slightly. "For thinking you could handle losing me," she whispered. "For thinking you'd be better off without me in the middle of it." Daniel's mouth tightened. "That wasn't your decision." Claire nodded. "I know." Daniel sat in silence for a long time. The cabin felt heavy, like the air had thickened. He could hear Emma breathing down the hall. Steady, safe, for now. Daniel finally spoke. "What do we do now?" he asked. Claire's eyes met his. Her voice was quiet. "Re-end it," she said. Daniel stared at her. Claire leaned forward slightly. "We can't keep running," she continued. "And we can't go to the police blind. We need leverage. Proof that can't be buried." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You have something," he said. Claire nodded. "Yes." Daniel waited. Claire hesitated, then stood. She walked to the small duffel bag she'd brought inside earlier. She unzipped it slowly, like she was hesitating even now. She pulled out a small black flash drive. She held it in her hand for a second before giving it to Daniel. Daniel stared at it. "What is this?" he asked. Claire's voice was quiet. "Everything," she said. Daniel's fingers closed around it. He felt its weight, small and ordinary. And he hated that something so small could carry so much damage. "What's on it?" he asked. Claire sat back down. "Internal emails," she said. "Payment approvals, recorded calls." Daniel's eyes sharpened. "You recorded calls?" Claire nodded. "I didn't want to," she said. "But Marcus told me to. He said paper can disappear. Voices are harder to explain away." Daniel looked at the flash drive again. His jaw tightened. "This could get you arrested," he said. Claire nodded faintly. "I know." Daniel's voice was low. "This could get you killed." Claire's eyes stayed on him. "I already almost was," she whispered. Daniel felt something shift inside him again. Not anger. Something like respect, but heavier, because Claire wasn't just scared. She was stubborn. She always had been. Daniel turned the flash drive over in his fingers. "Where's Marcus now?" he asked. Claire hesitated. Then she said, "He's meeting someone tomorrow morning. Someone in the federal office." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Federal?" Claire nodded. "He thinks the state prosecutor is compromised," she said. "So, he reached out higher." Daniel's chest tightened. "Does he trust them?" Claire's voice came out dry. "No," she said. "But he trusts them more than local." Daniel stared at her. "And you're telling me this now," he said. Claire nodded. "Because if we do this," she whispered, "we do it together." Daniel didn't respond right away. He looked toward the hallway again. Emma, their child. He thought about the grave, the dirt, the stone, the way it had felt like a permanent ending. He thought about the way he'd lived the last week, walking through his own house like it wasn't his. And he thought about Claire sitting across from him now, alive but damaged. Not a miracle, a consequence. Daniel finally spoke. "If we do this," he said, "there's no more hiding." Claire nodded slowly. "I know." Daniel's voice was low. "And if it goes wrong, Emma loses both of us." Claire's face tightened. "I know," she whispered again. Daniel exhaled slowly. He looked down at the flash drive in his hand. Then he said, "We need to move fast." Claire nodded. "Yes." Daniel stood and walked to the small kitchen counter. He opened the cabinet above the sink and pulled out a notepad and pen. He started writing without thinking. Names: John Keller, Sandra Reeves, Richard Hale, Mariah, her boyfriend, dates, times, anything that mattered. Claire watched him. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Daniel kept writing. Then he stopped and stared at the paper. His hand hovered over one name. Mariah, his sister-in-law, the woman who had stood beside him while he mourned. He felt something sick rise in his stomach. He swallowed it down. Claire's voice came softly from the couch. Daniel. He didn't look up. What? He said. Claire hesitated. Then she said, I know you're not going to forgive me tonight. Daniel's jaw tightened. He kept his eyes on the paper. Claire's voice broke slightly, but I need you to know, I didn't stop loving you. Daniel's hand froze. He didn't look at her. He didn't answer. Because he didn't know what love meant anymore. Not after a grave, not after weeks of silence. But his chest hurt anyway, and that told him enough. They left before sunrise. Claire woke Emma gently, whispering her name until her eyes opened. Emma sat up slowly, still disoriented, then saw Claire standing there and froze like she thought she was dreaming again. Claire smiled faintly, not happy, just trying. Come on, she whispered. We're going for a drive. Emma nodded and climbed out of bed without complaint. She pulled on her shoes, grabbed her rabbit, and followed them out into the cold. Daniel loaded the car quietly. Laptop bag, folder, the flash drive tucked into an envelope and shoved deep into his jacket pocket. Claire stood on the porch for a second, scanning the trees. Daniel watched her. Do you see something? He asked. Claire shook her head. No, she said. I just don't trust quiet anymore. Daniel didn't respond. He understood that feeling now. They got into the car and drove back toward the city, but not directly. Claire directed him down back roads, through small towns that still had their streetlights on, through stretches of farmland where fog lay low over the fields. Emma slept in the back seat again, head leaning against the door. Daniel drove with both hands on the wheel, eyes steady. Claire sat stiff beside him. At one point she said, Marcus will meet us at a federal building downtown. He said we go in separately. Daniel's jaw tightened. Why separately? Claire glanced at him. So if someone's watching, it doesn't look like a family walking into a government office. Daniel nodded once. He didn't like it, but he understood it. By the time the city came into view, the sun was rising. Pale light spreading slowly over buildings. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was the sense that once they crossed into the city, everything would speed up. Things would happen whether they were ready or not. They parked 3 blocks away from the building Marcus had described. Claire shook Emma awake gently. Sweetheart, she whispered, we need you to stay quiet today. Emma rubbed her eyes. She looked out the window. Are we going to the police? She asked. Daniel answered before Claire could. Something like that. Emma nodded slowly. She didn't ask more. They walked the rest of the way. Claire kept her head down, hood up, moving like she was trying to shrink into the sidewalk. Daniel walked beside her, close enough that his shoulder almost brushed hers. Emma stayed between them, holding both their hands. That was the only reason Daniel could tolerate being out in the open, because Emma's hand and his grounded him. They reached the federal building. It was gray, tall, and plain, the kind of structure designed to feel impersonal. Security cameras at the corners, metal detectors inside. Claire stopped before the entrance. Daniel felt her grip tighten around Emma's hand. You okay? He asked quietly. Claire's eyes flicked to him. No, she said. Then she swallowed. But I'm here. Daniel nodded. They went inside. The lobby was cold and bright. People moved through it without looking at each other. The security guard watched them approach. Daniel's heart beat steadily. He didn't feel panic. He felt alert. Claire handed over her fake ID first. The guard glanced at it, barely caring, then waved her through. Daniel did the same. Emma didn't have to show anything. The guard barely looked at her. They passed through the metal detector. Daniel's eyes kept moving. He watched corners. Reflections in glass. Men, standing too still. He didn't see anyone familiar, but he couldn't shake the feeling that familiarity wasn't the danger. It was anonymity. Marcus had told Claire once that most people were caught because they expected a villain to look like a villain. Daniel didn't know what Marcus looked like. He didn't know if he'd recognize him. They reached the elevator bank. Claire checked her phone. "He said 3rd floor," she whispered. Daniel nodded. They stepped into the elevator. Emma looked up at Claire. "Are you going to go away again?" she asked softly. Claire's face tightened. She crouched in the elevator and looked Emma in the eyes. "No," she whispered. "Not if I can help it." Emma stared at her, searching. Then she nodded, accepting the answer the way she always did, like she had learned too quickly that certainty wasn't something adults could give. The elevator opened on the 3rd floor. The hallway was quiet. Beige carpet. Closed doors. Signs with department names. Claire led them to a door marked Office of Inspector General. Daniel's chest tightened. He hadn't expected that. Claire paused. She looked at Daniel. "If they take me in," she whispered, "you don't argue." Daniel's eyes sharpened. "What do you mean, take you in?" Claire swallowed. "I'm legally dead," she said. "My fingerprints are still mine. My face is still mine. I don't know what they'll do." Daniel's jaw clenched. "They're not taking you anywhere without me." Claire stared at him. "You can't do that," she whispered. Daniel's voice was low. "Watch me." Claire's lips trembled slightly. She looked away. Then she opened the door. Inside was a waiting room with stiff chairs and a receptionist behind glass. The receptionist looked up. "Can I help you?" Claire hesitated. Daniel stepped forward. "My name is Daniel Bennett," he said. "I need to speak with someone about an active fraud investigation involving Richard Hale and the Crestview Medical Research Foundation." The receptionist blinked. Her eyes moved to Claire. Claire stood still. Daniel felt her body tense beside him. The receptionist's gaze sharpened. "I'm going to need you to take a seat," she said slowly. Daniel didn't sit. He kept his voice calm. "We have evidence," he said. "We have recorded calls and internal documents." The receptionist disappeared behind the glass partition. Claire exhaled slowly. Emma clung to Claire's coat. Daniel stared at the hallway beyond the waiting room. A door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, dark suit. Not police, not uniform. He looked at Daniel first, then Claire. His expression changed. Not surprise. Recognition. Claire's hand tightened around Emma's. The man approached. "Mrs. Bennett," he said quietly. Daniel's stomach dropped. Claire didn't answer. The man glanced at Daniel. "My name is Agent Russell," he said. "We've been expecting you." Daniel's pulse spiked. "Expecting us," he repeated. Agent Russell nodded. "We've been in contact with Marcus Vance." Claire's shoulders loosened slightly. Daniel felt a fang release too. Not safety, but direction. Russell gestured toward a door. "Come with me," he said. "All of you." Daniel didn't move right away. He studied Russell's face. He didn't see threat there. But he'd learned how little that mattered. Claire whispered, "Daniel." Daniel nodded once. They followed Russell into a small conference room. The room smelled like coffee and printer ink. A metal table. Fluorescent lights. A single camera in the corner. Russell shut the door behind them. "Sit," he said. Daniel sat. Claire sat beside him. Emma climbed into Claire's lap without asking. Russell placed a folder on the table. Daniel watched it carefully. Then Russell looked at Claire. "First," he said, "we need to confirm you're alive." Claire's face tightened. Daniel's jaw clenched. Russell held up a hand. "I'm not here to arrest you," he said. "I'm here to protect you. But you need to understand something." He leaned forward slightly. "This isn't just financial fraud," he said. "It's tied to federal contracts, defense medical procurement. There are people above Hale who don't want this exposed." Daniel felt his stomach drop. Claire's face went pale. Russell continued, voice steady. "You were right to run," he said to Claire. "But your death created a problem. Hale believed he solved it. Now he's nervous." Daniel's voice came out low. "Good." Russell looked at him. It means he'll act, Russell said, not through paperwork, through people. Claire's fingers tightened around Emma. Russell opened his folder and slid out a photograph. Daniel's breath caught. It was the car from across Daniel's street. Clear now. License plate visible. Russell slid another photo. Mariah, walking into a building, speaking to a man Daniel didn't recognize. Then another, Mariah's boyfriend, standing beside Richard Hale. Daniel's hands curled into fists. Claire stared at the photos like she already knew, but seeing it confirmed something in her eyes. Russell looked at Daniel. "You were right to distrust her," he said. Daniel didn't respond. Russell's gaze shifted to Claire. "We can offer you protection," he said, "but you have to cooperate fully. No more disappearing." Claire swallowed hard. "I will," she said. Russell nodded. "And you," he said, turning to Daniel, "need to understand the next few weeks are going to be difficult." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" Russell's voice stayed calm. "It means you may be asked to testify," he said. "It means your wife may be charged with falsifying identity documents. It means your family will be moved, guarded, watched." Emma's small voice came from Claire's lap. "Are you going to take my mom away?" Russell's expression softened slightly. "No," he said, "not away from you, but we're going to keep her safe." Emma stared at him. Then she looked at Claire. Claire kissed her forehead. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the envelope. He slid the flash drive across the table. Russell's eyes lowered to it. He didn't touch it immediately. He looked at Claire. "Is this everything?" he asked. Claire nodded. "Yes." Russell picked up the flash drive and placed it into a small evidence bag. Then he looked at Daniel again. "You did the right thing bringing her in," he said. Daniel's jaw tightened. He didn't feel like he'd done the right thing. He felt like he'd done the only thing left. Russell stood. "I need you to stay here," he said. "Someone will come get you shortly." He opened the door, paused, and looked back. "And, Mr. Bennett," he added, "you need to be prepared." Daniel stared at him. "For what?" Russell's voice dropped slightly. "For the fact that the person who hurt your wife isn't the only person who lied to you." Then he left. The door shut. The room went quiet. Emma shifted in Claire's lap, tired again, her eyes heavy. Claire stared at the table. Daniel stared at the wall. He felt Russell's last sentence settle in his chest. "Isn't the only person who lied to you." Daniel's jaw clenched. He thought of Mariah. He thought of John. He thought of Sandra. And then, uninvited, he thought of Claire herself. Claire leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes. "I didn't want you to know," she whispered. Daniel looked at her. His voice came out quiet. "I know." Claire's breathing trembled. Daniel watched her for a long moment. Then he reached over and took her hand. Not gently, not romantically, just firmly, like he was anchoring something. Claire's fingers tightened around his. Emma fell asleep against Claire's chest. Daniel sat there holding Claire's hand, staring at the blank wall. And for the first time since the grave, he felt something settle inside him. Not peace, but the beginning of truth. Because whatever happened next, arrests, trials, danger, consequences, at least the lies were finally in the room where they could be named, and Daniel realized something he hadn't expected. The hardest part hadn't been believing Claire was dead. The hardest part was learning she had been alive, and choosing silence anyway. He held her hand tighter. Not to punish her, to remind himself she was real. Because the person he mourned at that grave was gone. But the person sitting beside him now was still here, and that was the part he would have to learn how to live with.